Hello and welcome to Hidden Dusk, a place where the night grows quiet and the shadows begin to tell their stories. Before we begin, dim the lights, get comfortable and relax. And if you enjoy calm and eerie stories like this, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Now, let the darkness guide you into tonight's story. For 3 years, I rented various rooms in an old Victorian home in suburban Massachusetts, built in 1890. Due to changing roommate circumstances and the way the house was divided into 2 separate units, I had to move between rooms as leases shifted. While much about my home life changed during this time, one thing remained constant. The house always had an air of unease. Strange, inexplicable things happened regularly, and not a single day went by where everything seemed completely logical. The house itself was a Queen and Victorian with gingerbread-style trim and pointed gables on either side. It had 3 floors, including an attic and a winding driveway that circled the property. 2 front doors served the separate units. The first floor door led into a small closet that connected to a bedroom via another door. The second front door opened to a staircase leading upstairs, where a landing turned left into a small hallway. At the back of the house, 2 more doors provided access. One to the downstairs kitchen and another leading to the upstairs kitchen. The living room dominated the center of the first floor. The first room I rented was on the ground floor, connected to the living room. There was a door in the corner of my room that led to a closet, which could also be accessed from the living room. This closet was odd. It had a small window and didn't feel like a traditional closet at all. It was tucked directly under the stairs, separated from the front hall closet by a thin wall. On my first night in the house, I felt uneasy. As I lay in bed, I had the distinct sensation of being watched from that closet. Though I couldn't see anything in the dark, I imagined eyes staring at me from within. Feeling exposed, I got up to shut the door and double-checked that the window in the closet was locked. Satisfied, I went back to bed. That's when I first heard it. A quiet, high-pitched beep every few minutes. It sounded like a dying smoke detector, and while annoying, it was faint enough that I eventually fell asleep. The next day, I searched for the source of the sound. I checked every smoke detector in the house, but none of them were chirping. The sound didn't seem to come from any specific direction. If I stood in the kitchen, it seemed to come from the living room. If I stood in the living room, it seemed to come from the kitchen. I even checked the basement, but the sound was barely audible there. Finally, I asked the upstairs tenants if they could hear it. They couldn't, and their disbelief sent chills down my spine. Wherever the sound was coming from, it was confined to my immediate space, and I couldn't pinpoint its source. My roommate, who had lived there for a year, admitted she'd heard the noise before, but it was sporadic and never lasted long. After 2 weeks of relentless beeping, it stopped abruptly at 3 a.m. one night. I never heard it again, but the mystery haunted me. Not long after, I was woken at 1 a.m. by heavy footsteps on the front staircase and upstairs landing. My room was directly beneath the stairs, so I could hear the thuds clearly. It sounded as though someone was pacing up and down the stairs. Assuming it was one of the upstairs tenants stepping out for a cigarette, I waited to hear the front door open, but it never did. The footsteps continued for about half an hour before stopping. The next day, I asked the upstairs tenants about it, but they claimed they weren't home at the time. The pacing had occurred in an empty apartment. Over the months, I heard other strange sounds, including what seemed like a ball rolling down the stairs and hitting the front door. My roommate dismissed it as the tenants fooling around, but I wasn't so sure. The unease deepened when I noticed the window in the closet was frequently unlocked. I had checked it on my first night and confirmed it was firmly locked, yet I would often find it unlocked again. No one else admitted to touching it. I eventually removed my belongings from the closet, blocked its door with a dresser, and moved a table against the second door that connected the closet to the living room. One night, I woke to the sound of heavy boots walking through the house. The footsteps started at the front door, moved through the closet, and stopped at the blocked door to my room. The wall separating the 2 closets made such a journey impossible, yet the sound was unmistakable. Frozen with fear, I hid under my covers until the noise stopped. It happened 3 times in the early morning hours, each time leaving me terrified. During the day, I sometimes heard similar footsteps descending the back staircase, only to stop behind the refrigerator in the kitchen. There was no door or space for anyone to stand there, yet I would hear the sound of a doorknob turning. I later learned that the staircase had once faced the opposite direction and led directly into the downstairs kitchen before renovations in the 1950s. By December, I had had enough. I prayed to whatever higher power might exist to make the activity stop. Though the strange occurrences didn't cease entirely, they became minor. Misplaced items, doors closing on their own, and the living room light refusing to work unless the wall switch was in the correct position, despite neither me nor my roommate touching it. In May, during the final week of my lease, everything escalated. On a Friday night, as the upstairs tenants threw a wild party, I heard a knock at my door. Assuming it was a party guest who had knocked on the wrong door, I opened it to find a pale-faced young man standing there. In a dazed voice, he asked where his brother was. Before I could answer, he shoved past me into the apartment, insisting his brother lived there and that I was hiding him. He ran through the rooms, finally disappearing into the kitchen. Shaken, I grabbed my phone to call the police. When the officers arrived, they searched every inch of the apartment, including the closet I had blocked off. The furniture I had placed against the doors was undisturbed. There was no sign of the man anywhere. The only clue, the closet window, the only one left unlocked. I moved out the following week. To this day, I have no explanation for what I experienced in that house. But I know I'll never return. Nearly 2 months ago, I encountered something or someone that I hadn't seen since I was 9 years old. I've just turned 70 this past May, but he hasn't aged a day. The man with the gold tooth appeared exactly as he did back then. Time has not touched him, though it certainly has touched me. He seems smaller now, almost like one of Tweed's little people. I found him sitting in my big old rocking chair, his legs too short to reach the arms, gripping the seat's edges. The chair, tucked away in the attic, hadn't been used in years. It didn't fit the polished antique aesthetic of my home. His thin, shiny white hair gleamed under the dim attic light, and his vivid blue eyes were framed by deep laugh lines. He wore a gray woven suit, complete with a fine gold watch chain that disappeared into his front pocket. But it was his unforgettable gold tooth, visible through his bold smile, that instantly took me back decades. The chair had always been special, once stored in the cellar of my childhood home. It held fond memories of my dad sitting near the furnace, unlacing his boots after a long day, while our farm dog snoozed on the other side. As a child, I often met the man in the rocking chair near this very spot. My mother dismissed him as a figment of my imagination, just a product of a child's active mind. But I remember our talks, his kindness, and the laughter we shared. He was a friend, even if no one else could see him. The attic that day was filled with items I'd been sorting, deciding what to keep or toss. I was working on labeling old photographs for my nieces, nephews, and grandchildren when I saw him. My breath caught, and my steps faltered at the sight of him. He sat motionless, as if he had been waiting for me. In that moment, I knew why he was here. He had come for me, just as he had come for my mother all those years ago. Back then, during her last days, I saw him in that same chair, rocking ever so slightly, just as he was now. Steeling myself, I continued to the old dresser, determined to focus on my task. Labeling the photos was part of a larger plan to leave everything organized for my husband and son when I was gone. Free days were spent tackling projects like this, the ones not overtaken by medical appointments or other obligations. The oncologist's words from months ago still echoed in my mind. Stage 4. Urgent. The cancer I thought was cured in 2003 had returned with a vengeance in 2018. The treatments were a nightmare. A cruel déjà vu. Seeing the little man in the attic confirmed what I had feared. My time was running out. I turned back to him, unable to stop myself. "How soon?" I asked quietly. He didn't answer. His gaze was distant, fixed on something unseen, his hair gently stirring in a wind I couldn't feel. I asked again, my voice trembling. "When?" Still, he didn't respond. His silence was as unsettling as his presence. Clenching my hands, I reminded myself I wasn't a child anymore. But the strength I tried to muster failed me. Abandoning my project, I fled the attic, overwhelmed and unable to cope. That evening, I sat at my computer, phone in hand, desperate to call my niece Val. Born when I was 4, Val and I were more like sisters than aunt and niece. We shared an uncanny connection, even experiencing paranormal events together. I needed her now more than ever. I was about to call when the phone rang. Smiling, I answered, "Hi, Val." But it wasn't Val. It was her husband. "Val left early," he explained. "But she was in an accident. She's at a hospital not far from you. Can you check on her? I'll head over first thing in the morning." My heart stopped as panic set in. "Is she okay?" I managed to ask. "She's fine," he assured me. "Just a broken wrist and some bruises. She needs a new car, but otherwise, she's lucky." Relief washed over me, my heart pounding again. Val would be okay. My mind reeled, wondering how I hadn't sensed it. Our bond had always been so strong. For years, I believed the man in the rocking chair had come to take my mother, a harbinger of death. But now I wasn't so sure. Could Mr. Goldtooth have been watching over Val? Protecting her in some way? The thought left me confused. More confused than I had ever been. For a lifetime, I thought I understood his purpose. But now I'm not certain. Was he here to guide me to the next life? Or was he somehow helping my family stay in this one? We've owned our home for 39 years now, as of May 2018. This house has been witness to our lives, our joys, struggles, and all the changes time brings. When we bought it, it was a fixer-upper, the best we could afford back then. Built in 1962, the house had a story of its own. The house was constructed by an older woman's family, fulfilling her dream of a smaller home. Her sons did much of the work alongside a carpenter. From 1962 to 1979, however, no updates or improvements had been made. When my husband and I moved in, we were determined to renovate it from top to bottom, turning it into a home we could be proud of. Over the years, we added a deck, a garage, a 3-season room, and even a pool. But let's go back to the beginning. In December 1978, the home's original owner had a tragic accident. While checking her mailbox before heading to a Christmas party at the senior center, her car slipped out of gear. She was knocked down and run over by her own car, a 1960 Falcon. Even worse, the car, still in high choke, circled the yard, crashing through the hedges and running over her again. A passing motorist finally stopped the vehicle before it could happen a third time. The local newspaper detailed the gruesome event, describing the broken hedges and damaged yard. The woman succumbed to her injuries in the hospital, but not before her sons were able to say goodbye. Months later, the house came up for sale. After years of fruitless house hunting, we initially said no to the listing. But eventually, worn down by the endless search and its reasonable price, we caved. My sort of friend, who was related to the late owner, wasn't shy about her opinion. "What are you, a thrill seeker?" she asked. At the time, we were just tired of looking and planned to fix up the house and sell it later. When I first toured the house, it was cluttered, masking its flaws, and any lingering energies. Everyone described the former owner as a kind woman, and I convinced myself that this was true. I looked forward to making the house our own. From the start, everything that could go wrong did. For example, we knew the hot water tank needed replacing, so we called Sears right away. 3 82-gallon water heaters failed, flooding the basement each time. I mopped up the mess repeatedly until the water department finally installed a pressure reducer. They offered no explanation for why it was suddenly needed and left as quickly as they could. My husband switched to a 3 to 11 work shift to focus on home renovations during the day, while I scrubbed and painted every room. The house needed it. Much of the woodwork was damaged, likely from grandchildren running wild. I remember our young son sitting on a floor buffer as my husband polished the old floors room by room. The basement revealed more of the house's past. One of the late owner's adult sons had lived down there, and the space reeked of cigarettes and alcohol. Took years for the smell to finally fade. It wasn't long before I noticed something else. A presence. At first, it was subtle, a lingering feeling like someone watching. When my son ran into the kitchen one day with handfuls of pennies he'd found buried in the garden, I thought it was a kind gesture from the spirit. Why else would someone bury $2.63 along the garden's edge? My son even dreamed of an old lady sitting on a pretend chair, laughing and talking to him. I thought maybe she was happy with the changes we were making to her little house. But things didn't stay gentle for long. One night, after dinner, I sat in the living room while my husband cleaned up in the kitchen. Suddenly, he shouted, "What are you doing?" I turned to see every burner on the stove blazing red hot, even the oven. I screamed back, "You know I'd never do that." It was unsettling, to say the least. The kitchen held more surprises. While replacing the wainscot paneling, we found papers hidden behind it. A grocery list, postcards, and a photo of the late owner. In it, she was smiling in a green lawn chair, her pixie-cut hair and warm expression matching how I imagined her spirit. As the years passed, her presence became harder to ignore. One morning, while reaching for oatmeal, a delicate blown-glass dancer I'd made in art school flew out of the cupboard and smashed on the tile floor. Other dancers disappeared, never to be found. The bathroom faucets alternated between scalding hot and freezing cold without explanation. And when my husband traveled for work, leaving me alone with our son, I began hearing whispers. Though I couldn't make out the words, they felt intentional, as if trying to frustrate me. One spring day, while tending the garden, I looked up and saw her. She stood under the oak tree, waving. She looked younger, almost radiant. As she turned toward the woods, she became translucent, fading with each step until she was gone. I haven't seen or heard from her since that day. I believe her tragic passing left her spirit tied to this house, needing time to adjust before moving on. Now I think she's found peace. 3 of her 4 sons have passed, and perhaps she no longer feels the need to linger here. We've owned our home for 39 years now, as of May 2018. This house has been witness to our lives, our joys, struggles, and all the changes time brings. When we bought it, it was a fixer-upper, the best we could afford back then. Built in 1962, the house had a story of its own. The house was constructed by an older woman's family, fulfilling her dream of a smaller home. Her sons did much of the work alongside a carpenter. From 1962 to 1979, however, no updates or improvements had been made. When my husband and I moved in, we were determined to renovate it from top to bottom, turning it into a home we could be proud of. Over the years, we added a deck, a garage, a 3-season room, and even a pool. But let's go back to the beginning. In December 1978, the home's original owner had a tragic accident. While checking her mailbox before heading to a Christmas party at the senior center, her car slipped out of gear. She was knocked down and run over by her own car, a 1960 Falcon. Even worse, the car, still in high choke, circled the yard, crashing through the hedges and running over her again. A passing motorist finally stopped the vehicle before it could happen a third time. The local newspaper detailed the gruesome event, describing the broken hedges and damaged yard. The woman succumbed to her injuries in the hospital, but not before her sons were able to say goodbye. Months later, the house came up for sale. After years of fruitless house hunting, we initially said no to the listing. But eventually, worn down by the endless search and its reasonable price, we caved. My sort of friend, who was related to the late owner, wasn't shy about her opinion. "What are you, a thrill seeker?" she asked. At the time, we were just tired of looking and planned to fix up the house and sell it later. When I first toured the house, it was cluttered, masking its flaws and any lingering energies. Everyone described the former owner as a kind woman, and I convinced myself that this was true. I looked forward to making the house our own. From the start, everything that could go wrong did. For example, we knew the hot water tank needed replacing, so we called Sears right away. 3 82-gallon water heaters failed, flooding the basement each time. I mopped up the mess repeatedly until the water department finally installed a pressure reducer. They offered no explanation for why it was suddenly needed and left as quickly as they could. My husband switched to a 3 to 11 work shift to focus on home renovations during the day, while I scrubbed and painted every room. The house needed it. Much of the woodwork was damaged, likely from grandchildren running wild. I remember our young son sitting on a floor buffer as my husband polished the old floors room by room. The basement revealed more of the house's past. One of the late owner's adult sons had lived down there, and the space reeked of cigarettes and alcohol. Took years for the smell to finally fade. It wasn't long before I noticed something else. A presence. At first, it was subtle, a lingering feeling like someone watching. When my son ran into the kitchen one day with handfuls of pennies he'd found buried in the garden, I thought it was a kind gesture from the spirit. Why else would someone bury $2.63 along the garden's edge? My son even dreamed of an old lady sitting on a pretend chair, laughing and talking to him. I thought maybe she was happy with the changes we were making to her little house. But things didn't stay gentle for long. One night, after dinner, I sat in the living room while my husband cleaned up in the kitchen. Suddenly, he shouted, "What are you doing?" I turned to see every burner on the stove blazing red hot, even the oven. I screamed back, "You know I'd never do that." It was unsettling, to say the least. The kitchen held more surprises. While replacing the wainscot paneling, we found papers hidden behind it. A grocery list, postcards, and a photo of the late owner. In it, she was smiling in a green lawn chair, her pixie-cut hair and warm expression matching how I imagined her spirit. As the years passed, her presence became harder to ignore. One morning, while reaching for oatmeal, a delicate blown-glass dancer I'd made in art school flew out of the cupboard and smashed on the tile floor. Other dancers disappeared, never to be found. The bathroom faucets alternated between scalding hot and freezing cold without explanation. And when my husband traveled for work, leaving me alone with our son, I began hearing whispers. Though I couldn't make out the words, they felt intentional, as if trying to frustrate me. One spring day, while tending the garden, I looked up and saw her. She stood under the oak tree, waving. She looked younger, almost radiant. As she turned toward the woods, she became translucent, fading with each step until she was gone. I haven't seen or heard from her since that day. I believe her tragic passing left her spirit tied to this house, needing time to adjust before moving on. Now I think she's found peace. 3 of her 4 sons have passed, and perhaps she no longer feels the need to linger here. Though she's gone, I often think of her. This house, with all its memories and struggles, wouldn't be the same without her. Wherever she is, I hope she's happy. My great-aunt, who lived for decades in an 1890s Victorian home that has been in our family for generations, was recently moved into assisted living. The house, featured in my first story where I was choked by an unseen force while holding an old necklace, is now in disrepair. With its failing structure and severe contamination, it will likely be condemned and demolished. A plumber called to inspect drainage issues reported the home to the town health inspector, and we negotiated one final visit to remove heirlooms and belongings before the house is lost forever. Pulling up to the house, sadness washed over me. Once one of the largest homes on the street, with its gingerbread trim, gabled roof, and draped windows, it had been the first home my great-grandparents owned after immigrating to the U.S. This was where my grandmother grew up. The thought of it being demolished was hard to bear. As I stared up at the house, a curtain in one attic window fluttered slightly. Was it a draft? Or something else? I pointed it out to my mom, but the movement stopped before she saw it. Just as she turned away, I caught a glimpse of a dark-skinned woman in a white dress passing through another attic window, vanishing as quickly as she appeared. Knowing the house had been completely empty for months made the sight chilling. Inside, the house was darker and more oppressive than I remembered. The chipped yellow wallpaper, the creaking floors, and the thick shadows gave an overwhelming sense that we weren't alone. We split up to search for items. I was assigned the attic and second floor, my stepdad the basement, and everyone else stayed on the first floor. The upper floors hadn't had updated wiring in years, so I was instructed not to turn on any lights. This made the already ominous space feel suffocating. Walking down the upstairs hallway with its wood-paneled walls and dark doors, I felt as if unseen eyes were following me. The oppressive energy was so strong I darted into the nearest room, an old dining room now filled with boxes. As I searched, I found old photographs of my great-grandparents and relatives from the 1800s. In one box, I discovered an old key. Curious, I tried it in every door upstairs but found no match. Entering the upstairs kitchen, frozen in time with dishes still in the sink and an iron on the board, I finally found the lock. The key fit the door leading to the narrow back staircase. Satisfied, I locked the door and turned to leave, when I heard my mother calling from what sounded like the front of the house. Running toward the sound, I passed the attic door, which was wide open. From above, I heard boxes being shuffled. Assuming my mom and aunt were up there, I called out, but got no response. I climbed the attic stairs, which opened into a cramped hallway with low ceilings and green-trimmed doorways. The rooms, blocked with piles of boxes and furniture, were clearly once used as bedrooms. A rustling sound came from the far end of the hallway, and I noticed a curtain fluttering, though the window was bolted shut. Coins seemed to drop and roll across the floor, accompanied by faint giggling. My heart raced as I felt an overwhelming sense of being watched. Panicked, I bolted down the stairs, only to slam into the attic door, now inexplicably closed. I tried desperately to open it, but it wouldn't budge. From above, I heard soft footsteps descending the stairs, the sound of heels clicking closer. A shadow appeared on the wall, growing larger with every step. Terrified, I pounded on the door until it suddenly gave way. I stumbled out, slamming it shut behind me. In the hallway, I noticed a photograph lying on the floor. It was of the same woman I had seen in the attic window. I brought the photo downstairs to my grandmother, who immediately recognized the woman. She explained that it was her mother's sister, who had lived in the attic with her 3 children in the 1940s. After her husband's death, she was allowed to live there but was told to stay out of sight because her darker complexion might raise questions about the family's racial identity. One of her children had died of scarlet fever in the attic. Until that moment, I hadn't known of this relative, and her story broke my heart. Could her spirit still be lingering, trying to make herself known? Meanwhile, my stepdad, who doesn't believe in the paranormal, had his own unsettling experience upstairs. While searching, he heard footsteps and saw doors creaking open and shut by themselves. He even heard a female voice calling his name but couldn't locate its source. Dismissing it as a prank, he insisted we must have been hiding and playing tricks on him, but we had all been downstairs. Later, as he searched one room, he noticed movement out of the corner of his eye, but when he turned, there was nothing there. After we collected all the items we wanted, we prepared to leave. As I drove away, I glanced back at the house. In the attic window, I swear I saw her silhouette again. A woman in a white dress, her hair pinned up, gazing out into the backyard. Will she find peace when the house is gone? Or will she find another way to reach out and share her story? I was very young the first time I heard the bell. A faint, delicate ting followed by a soft whisper, so quiet I couldn't make out the words. As if sensing my fear, the sound would fade away. The bell always preceded the voice, but for simplicity, I won't mention it again. The voice, a young man's, always came from a corner near the ceiling, no matter which room or house I was in. At first it frightened me, but over time I grew used to it. His voice was gentle, reassuring, and became a strange constant in my life. As I grew older, I came to expect it. When he spoke, it felt almost normal. Years passed between his visits, yet when I heard him again, I'd think, "I've missed you." It wasn't until I became sick that I truly began to understand him. Weak and bedridden, his voice grew clearer. I'd look to my closet, imagining him sitting or lying on the top shelf. His words carried a hint of an Irish or Scottish brogue, occasionally mixed with French. It felt like my illness unlocked a door to understanding what he'd been saying all along. He spoke of his home and family, of a life at the turn of the 20th century. He told me we were cousins and described his 7 brothers and 1 sister, painting vivid pictures of their lives. He spoke of the riverbank near his home, where he fished and wandered through fields of wildflowers. The river, he said, flowed into the Atlantic Ocean, and he mentioned New Brunswick more than once. At times, I wondered if these conversations were a side effect of the chemo. But the details he shared, his father being half American Indian and half Scottish, his mother's strong Scottish roots, and their close-knit, faith-driven family, felt too precise to be imagined. These stories filled a void I hadn't realized existed. My mother had passed when I was a child, leaving me with little knowledge of her family. Through him, I learned about the Scottish way of life close to family and church. Sometimes he'd fall silent for months, overwhelmed with sadness, he said. His absence was palpable, leaving me wondering why he felt such sorrow. During one of his quiet periods, I placed a pillow and blanket on the top shelf of the closet, hoping to bring him comfort. Over the years, he became one of my closest friends. Don't laugh, it's true. After so many conversations, I couldn't help but feel a bond. Yet, I never saw him or felt his touch. I only knew his voice and his stories. Recently, things changed. His voice grew louder, more insistent. He repeated numbers, 7-2-7-4, and shouted phrases like private and expeditionary. He said, "My mother is Alice MC. I am your cousin. Please help." The urgency in his tone frightened me. He kept repeating, Hill 70 Hill 70 Hill 70 expeditionary. Then, in 2018, I got cancer again. The fight was grueling, chemo, surgery, and more chemo. It was the hardest battle of my life, and through it, my Canadian cousin went silent. Perhaps out of respect, he left me to focus on survival. By March 2019, I was recovering, though slowly. My hair was just beginning to grow back, and the worst seemed behind me. One evening, the phone rang. We usually ignore calls from unknown numbers, but something told me to answer. It was a woman from Canada. She asked if I was Jan, and if I was the granddaughter of Edith. When I confirmed, she shared astonishing news. She worked for a division of the Canadian government that traces relatives of soldiers who went missing during the war. She was seeking DNA from maternal descendants to help identify remains of soldiers with no known grave. My heart raced as she revealed that Edith had a sister, Alice, the same name my cousin had repeated endlessly. The pieces clicked into place. The emails that followed painted a clearer picture. My cousin wasn't just a voice in the corner. He was a soldier, a Highlander who had fought at Vimy Ridge and Hill 70 in Lens, France. My table soon overflowed with documents, photographs, and family records. A faded picture of a young man in uniform labeled Expeditionary Highlander gave me chills. The task was clear. I needed to gather living relatives to contribute DNA. Due to the effects of chemo on my own DNA, mine couldn't be used. But with my cousin's help, I located 5 willing relatives. Their kits were sent off, and I finally felt I was doing what my cousin had so desperately wanted, helping him find peace. As I pieced together our family's history, I marveled at how the information he shared matched what the researchers uncovered. Without him, I'd never have known where to begin. To this day, the bell remains silent, as does my Canadian cousin. I don't know if he's at peace or still waiting, but his story has found a voice, and I'm honored to be the one to share it. If you're curious, look into Vimy Ridge and Hill 70. The stories are endless and devastating. They speak to the horrors of war, but also to the lives of those who lived and fought with bravery. And now, thanks to a voice that whispered from the corner of my room, one more story will finally be told.
Sorry to interrupt. If you're enjoying the story, let me know in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more. Our story began 7 months ago, just 4 days before Super Bowl Sunday. My husband and I went to bed as usual. That night, I had a brief but unsettling nightmare. In the dream, I saw a man standing in a dark doorway. I began walking toward the door, and just as I was about to step inside, he yelled, "No, stop." But I was already through the threshold. The moment I stepped into the room, a powerful energy surged through me. I woke up immediately, still feeling the energy coursing through my body. It was so strong that I couldn't ignore it for several minutes. Lying there, trying to calm myself, I had this strange sensation that my blanket was moving, though I couldn't see anything. The next morning, my husband called, as he always does, to ask how I'd slept. Hesitantly, I told him about my dream. To my surprise, he replied, "That's weird because I could have sworn there was a cat walking on our bed last night." There was a moment of silence before I said, "Oh my God, I felt it too." Since that night, this energy has become a constant presence in our lives. It visits us nightly as we sleep and has even started tormenting us at work. We work in different cities, yet we both experience it. Sometimes it feels like a light electrical charge on various parts of our bodies, especially our heads and legs. For me, it often feels like something is wrapping around my legs, whether I'm sitting at my desk or driving. It's followed us onto airplanes, into our cars, and everywhere else. There's no escaping it. We've tried everything to get rid of it. Over the past 7 months, we've consulted 2 different psychic mediums, each of whom tried twice. We've had a shaman cleanse the house and even sought help from a Reiki energy expert. Nothing worked. Desperate, I turned to my church. A priest blessed our home 5 different times, but the energy remained. We're running out of hope. It's not like anything we've ever read about or seen on TV. We've seen 2 orbs and captured both male and female voices on a recording. The energy feels intelligent, but it doesn't respond in a way we can understand. We've tried sage, holy water, being kind, demanding it to leave, and even yelling in frustration. Nothing helps. For 19 years, my home had no paranormal activity, nothing even remotely unusual. Then, suddenly, it's as if this energy invaded out of nowhere. We don't even sleep in our bedroom anymore because the energy feels stronger in there. It's not just us who are affected. When my daughter came home from college, she immediately felt it too. One night, she came to sleep with us, saying she felt a strong electrical energy covering her legs and as though something was tugging on her blankets, pulling her deeper into her bed. That sensation, the electrical energy, the blanket tugging, and the feeling of being pressed into the mattress, is something my husband and I have experienced countless times. Some nights are worse than others, but the torment never stops. We feel it hovering over us, yet we cannot see it. Occasionally, it feels like a feather brushing down the side of my face, across my arm, then back again. Even as I sit in my recliner typing this, I can feel it. It's as if something is kneading on my lap, like a cat making itself comfortable. Yet there's nothing there. This experience is terrifying, exhausting, and relentless. We don't know what it is, where it came from, or how to make it stop. All we know is that it's here, it's persistent, and it refuses to leave us alone.
This story begins 7 months ago, but for ease of telling, I'll refer to everyone in this story as who they are to me now. Stepdad and stepbrother, even though at the time they were family friends. My mom and stepdad married just a year ago, but we've known him since I was 5. Back then, he had recently moved to our town with his now ex-wife and son and purchased an old home in a remote area. The house, one of the oldest in the region, was built in the 1700s by a sea captain and had remained in his family for over 200 years. By the time my stepdad bought it, it had been abandoned for years and was in poor condition, but with significant renovations it looked beautiful again. The house was L-shaped, with the original 2-story section forming the main structure and a 1-floor addition from the 1800s housing the living room, kitchen, and a back office and bathroom. The first time I visited, my stepdad gave us a tour. The remodeled living room and kitchen were warm and inviting, with polished wood floors and a large fireplace. But everything changed when we stepped into the oldest part of the house at the front. I can't explain why, but a deep sense of anxiety washed over me. The front of the house felt darker, colder, and oppressive. This was especially true in the upstairs hallway and the staircase, which was narrow, low-ceilinged, and claustrophobic. The walls were painted deep blue and crimson, and the floors were dark wood. Despite the many windows, the area felt shrouded in an unnatural darkness. At the time, I chalked it up to my imagination and having read too many ghost stories. Still, I couldn't shake the sense of unease. I felt watched, like unseen eyes were glaring at me from every corner. I was afraid to open doors or turn corners, certain something would jump out at me. The feeling of being followed was inescapable. Whenever I was in the front part of the house and someone left to go to the back, where the atmosphere was lighter, I would run after them as fast as I could. Being alone there felt dangerous. As a child, I visited the house about once a week. My stepbrother, the same age as me, was fearless and loved exploring parts of the house I avoided. Once, while playing hide and seek, I searched the downstairs hoping not to have to go upstairs. Hearing a rustling sound in the closet under the stairs, I opened the door and shouted, "Found you!" But there was no one there, only a couple of jackets. Too scared to go upstairs alone, I asked my stepdad to help search for his son. As we climbed the stairs, I heard a noise from the hallway, like someone bumping into a wall. Turning the corner, I didn't see my stepbrother, but instead an old rocking chair swaying back and forth on its own. There was no draft, no window open, and no one in the chair. I heard a faint humming and felt hot breath on my neck, as if something unseen was standing beside me. Terrified, I flailed my arms at the empty air and screamed. Running downstairs, I bumped into my stepbrother, who had been hiding under the sofa in the back room. That was the last time I went upstairs alone for many years. A year later, my mom insisted I spend the night at the house to bond with my stepbrother. Despite my protests, I had to sleep in the upstairs bedroom. I begged to sleep on the sofa in the back living room, but my pleas were ignored. At bedtime, I watched my stepdad's ex-wife shut the bedroom door and turn off the lights. I fell asleep quickly but woke in the middle of the night to pitch-black darkness. My eyes couldn't adjust, and the air felt heavy. I heard deep breathing in the room and turned to find my stepbrother's bed empty. Footsteps echoed in the hallway, and I assumed he'd gone to the bathroom. When he didn't return, I hid under the covers, paralyzed with fear. Eventually, I bolted out of bed and ran down the stairs. The sound of heavy footsteps followed close behind, along with the sensation of someone breathing down my neck. Reaching the downstairs hallway, I ran straight into the dining room door. It was shut, though it was always left open. The crash woke my stepdad, who turned on the lights and ran to me. Panicked, I blurted out that someone was chasing me. He searched the house top to bottom and found nothing but allowed me to sleep on the sofa for the rest of the night. As I grew older, my fear subsided, but I still avoided being alone upstairs. The feeling of unseen presences watching and following me never went away. I often heard unexplained sounds. Music from another era, footsteps, or voices calling my name. Items were sometimes knocked off tables or moved without explanation, but the noises always stopped when someone else was present. Everyone dismissed my experiences, making me feel isolated and frustrated. When I was 12, my stepdad's family moved out of the house, and new owners lived there until 2016. That year, the house was listed for sale, and during an open house, I toured it again. The walls were now white, and the windows had been replaced with larger, modern ones. The renovations made the home feel less oppressive, though a faint presence lingered. Alone in the upstairs hallway, I stretched out my arms and said aloud, "If there's anyone here, reveal yourself to me." Nothing happened, but a light breeze passed by, causing a curtain to rustle. It felt like the house was acknowledging me, offering closure. Recently, my stepbrother admitted he'd felt the same oppressive presence upstairs but pretended to be brave. He eventually moved his room downstairs due to the overwhelming feeling of menace. My stepdad's ex-wife shared her own experiences, including hearing the sound of someone tumbling down the stairs late at night and finding no one there. Another time, she heard footsteps enter her room and the sound of a marble rolling across the floor, though nothing was ever there. Legend has it that 150 years ago, a woman was murdered on the staircase, pushed down the stairs by her husband during a heated argument. This story has never been confirmed, but it lingers in the town's lore, much like the house's ghostly presence lingers in my memory. On one of the main residential streets in my town, there is a charred, burnt-out home that suffered a devastating fire in June 2019. The house, consisting of 3 stacked apartment units, one on each floor, is beyond repair and likely to be demolished within the next year. No one knows how the fire started, but it was severe enough to nearly spread to the neighboring building. Thankfully, no one lost their life, but 3 families were left temporarily homeless. The front of the building is completely destroyed. The roof has burned through, and all the windows are boarded up. Yet, from the back, the house tells a different story. 3 stacked decks overlook a small parking lot and a baseball field, and surprisingly, this side of the building appears relatively intact. According to town records, the house dates back to 1900. I've only been inside the building once, years ago when I was at university. The students renting the bottom floor and basement at the time hosted fraternity parties there. I didn't find anything unusual about the house back then, other than it being extremely run down. I still remember one party being evacuated due to the smell of gas. Fortunately, it turned out to be a false alarm. After that, I never returned. Now, years later, I pass the house every evening on my walks. Last night, as I walked by, I decided to take a closer look at the building. Behind it, 2 kids, likely between 10 and 15 years old, were kicking around a soccer ball in the small parking lot, as they often do. I waved at them and then turned my attention to the house. From the back, the structure was eerily quiet, its blackened front hidden from view. My eyes scanned the darkened windows, which seemed to stare back like empty sockets. Then I saw it. In the window behind the second-floor deck, a silhouette, a human figure, stood motionless, looking out at the children below. I couldn't make out whether it was male or female, nor could I discern any facial features. It was simply a shadow of a person, distinct against the deep darkness of the room behind it, staring out the window. A chill ran through me. I turned to the kids and asked, "Do you see someone in that window up there?" They paused their game and looked up, but by the time they did, the figure was gone. "Ah, well, I guess it was my imagination," I said, trying to brush it off. "No one would even be able to get into that building. The doors are all boarded up." "Forget I said anything." The kids shrugged and went back to their game, but I couldn't shake what I had seen. Tonight, I decided to investigate further. Determined to capture a photo of the figure, I walked by the house again. The kids were in their usual spot, playing soccer. I scanned the building nervously, focusing on the second-floor window where I'd seen the figure the night before. Nothing. Just as I was about to give up and dismiss it as a trick of the light or my imagination, my eyes caught movement. This time, the figure stood in the third-floor window dead center watching the children below. The figure was unmistakably male. He wore what looked like a bowler derby hat, his silhouette stark against the blackness of the burnt-out interior. His face was indiscernible, just a void, but his presence was palpable. I racked my brain for an explanation. Could someone be inside the building? How? The ceiling had caved in across most of the structure, and the doors were boarded shut. The only windows not boarded up were at the back, and the upper levels of the deck weren't accessible from the ground. Climbing into the building seemed nearly impossible. Was it a spirit? The thought sent a shiver down my spine. Why would he be there? And why was he watching the children? I can't stop wondering if traumatic events like fires stir up negative energy or awaken spirits. Perhaps the house, with its history and its fiery destruction, harbors something left behind, something unseen yet deeply rooted. Whatever I saw, it's left me uneasy. And the question remains, who or what stands at those windows, silently watching? It was Halloween night, and I was 8 years old, eagerly preparing to go trick-or-treating with a group of neighborhood kids. My friend Jenny, her friends Haley and Allie, and Jenny's older brother, who was supervising us, were all dressed up and ready to go. With candy bags in hand, we were about to leave when Jenny's mom announced some strict rules. We had to be home by 9 p.m., we weren't to talk to strangers, and, most importantly, we were not to go down Captain Ellis Lane. "Why can't we go down Captain Ellis Lane?" I asked. "That's the rule." "Now have fun," she replied curtly, offering no further explanation. I knew where Captain Ellis Lane was. I had passed it with my mom before, but had never ventured down it. It was a dark, desolate road just a few streets over, and all I knew was that it led to an abandoned farm. From the main road, No houses were visible, and the street always seemed eerily empty. I figured the rule was just because the road was poorly lit and unnerving, and I put it out of my mind as we set off. The night was going perfectly. My costume was a hit, we collected a mountain of candy, and I was having the time of my life. As the evening wore on, I mentioned to Jenny's brother that we should start heading back. But my friends had other plans. As we walked, we found ourselves standing right in front of Captain Ellis Lane. I stopped in my tracks, ready to turn around, but my friends had different ideas. "What are you waiting for? Are we going or not?" they said. "No, we can't. Didn't you hear what Jenny's mom said? We're not supposed to go down this road," I protested. But it was too late. They had already started down the dark path, leaving me behind. Reluctantly, and feeling a knot of dread in my stomach, I ran to catch up. Captain Ellis Lane was unlike any other street we'd been on that night. It was pitch black, completely unlit, and eerily quiet except for the rustling of leaves and the faint metallic sound of a flag rattling against a pole somewhere in the distance. To my right, there was an old farmhouse at what appeared to be the end of the street, and ahead was a fenced-off plot of farmland. On the left side, the road was bordered by thick trees and brush, adding to the feeling of isolation. I felt as though we were being swallowed by the darkness. The road forked. To the right, it turned into a more normal-looking residential street with houses and lights. To the left was a gravel path encircling the fenced-off farmland. At the far end of the field, barely visible in the distance, was a small white shed. "1, 2, 3. I'll race you to the shed," Jenny shouted, taking off. "No, we're trespassing," I yelled after her, but they were already running. Heart pounding, I knew I couldn't stay behind alone, so I reluctantly followed. Just as we were about to take off toward the shed, a loud creak followed by a sharp thud broke the silence. We froze. The sound seemed to come from the shed, and Allie suggested it was just the wind blowing the door shut. I wasn't convinced, but before I could argue, they were already walking ahead, their excitement outweighing their fear. As we walked down the gravel road, I felt the distinct sensation of being followed. The person at the back of our group kept saying they could hear footsteps behind them, but every time we stopped to look, there was no one there. Jenny's brother called out, "Is someone there?" But no response came. As we approached the shed, I heard rustling in the woods to our right. These weren't the small, quick sounds of an animal. It sounded like deliberate human footsteps. Haley claimed she saw a shadow dart in front of the shed, but I didn't see it. I was too focused on the growing fear in my chest. We climbed over the fence into the field, the shed now just a few hundred feet away. Haley, the bravest among us, approached one of the windows and peered inside. First, everything seemed normal. She shone her flashlight into the shed, revealing gardening tools and empty crates. But then, without warning, she let out a blood-curdling scream, dropped her candy bucket, and bolted back toward the fence. "What is it? What did you see?" we shouted, but she couldn't get the words out. She was trembling and on the verge of tears, begging us to leave. Lights in the nearby houses flicked on, and voices carried across the dark. Haley's scream had drawn attention. Grabbing our things, we ran as fast as we could back to the road, hearts pounding, and disappeared into the shadows before anyone could spot us.
When we finally made it back to Jenny's house, Haley told us what she saw. She said that as she looked into the shed, she saw a small boy. But he wasn't normal. His eyes were bloody, gaping holes, his body skeletal and emaciated, and his rotting teeth formed a sinister smile. He began walking toward the window, and that was when she ran. We sat in stunned silence, terrified at the thought. Still, we swore we wouldn't tell Jenny's mom that we had disobeyed her rule. To this day, I don't know if Haley really saw what she described or if she was playing a cruel prank on us. But recently, I drove down Captain Ellis Lane during the day and noticed the shed was gone, replaced by a newer structure. I later learned that Jenny's mom had once considered buying a house on that street but chose otherwise, partly because she found the abandoned farm area unsettling and didn't want us wandering there. If only she knew what Haley saw that night. I've always been attuned to the spiritual realm. Some of my earliest childhood memories involve sensing spirits in various homes I visited. However, I hadn't experienced anything significant in years until a recent visit to my friend's apartment. She lives on the second floor of an old, rundown building in a small suburban town outside Boston. I had been there once before, about 3 years ago, but at the time, I was going through personal struggles and didn't pay attention to my surroundings. The apartment belongs to an elderly woman in her 80s, who my friend helps care for. She lives there as a roommate but also assists with daily tasks. The elderly woman's severe social anxiety means I can only visit when she's in the hospital or staying with family. The apartment has an unpleasant odor due to her health issues, which adds to the oppressive atmosphere. The apartment is small and square-shaped. As you enter, there's a dining table to your left, a narrow kitchen straight ahead, and a large living room to the left. Off the living room is a dark hallway with a bathroom on the right behind the kitchen and 2 bedrooms, one to the left and one at the end of the hall. The moment I stepped into the kitchen, I felt it. The air was heavy, oppressive, almost suffocating. It wasn't just the smell. There was a dark energy that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. Even with the windows open and white walls, the apartment felt dim and shadowy. I knew immediately that the apartment was haunted. My eyes were drawn to the back corner of the kitchen, a dark, poorly lit space where the overhead light didn't work. Though I couldn't see anything physically there, I felt a strong, heavy energy radiating from that corner. It felt wrong, like something was lurking just beyond my perception. I shuddered and quickly walked into the living room. As I placed my belongings on the pull-out bed, I felt compelled to explore the back hallway. My friend showed me around again, refreshing my memory of the layout. When we entered the bedroom at the end of the hall, I immediately felt a shift. The room had dark green carpeting, blue walls, and a bunk bed for her daughters. Despite the cheerful decorations, stuffed animals, and snow globes, the energy was deeply sad. It felt wistful, almost mournful, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. The sensation was strongest in the right-hand corner beside the bed, along the wall that bordered the bathroom. I felt something glaring at me, as though my presence was unwelcome. It was as if the spirit in the room wanted me to leave. As I was leaving the room, an image suddenly popped into my head. I saw a little girl, about 8 years old, wearing a blue Sunday dress. Her blonde hair was styled in pigtails, similar to Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz. Her eyes were sad. Then, just as suddenly, the image changed. I saw the same girl, lifeless, drowned in a bathtub. The vision shocked me, and I shuddered. I had no idea where the thought had come from. I turned to my friend and asked if a little girl had ever drowned in the bathtub here, maybe decades ago. I described the girl, and to my surprise, my friend admitted she had seen a spirit with the same appearance. She said the girl often peeked out from the bathroom door or wandered the hallway at night, vanishing if anyone stared too long. My friend also had a similar impression that the girl had drowned, but she believed it happened in the nearby river, not the apartment. I couldn't shake my conviction that it happened in the bathtub. Later that evening, we went out for dinner and then to a healing circle where I said a prayer for the little girl, asking that she find peace and move on to the afterlife. That night, I occasionally woke up, feeling a presence near me. Though I couldn't see anything in the pitch-black room, I knew something was there. My eyes kept being drawn to the bathroom. It felt as if someone or something was staring at me from the bathroom door. I covered my head with a blanket and said prayers until I fell back asleep.
I felt strongly that the girl's spirit was trapped here. Whether she had been abused, murdered, or had taken her own life, she seemed unable to leave. Since waking up, I've noticed small, strange occurrences. Fleeting shadows in my peripheral vision, blinds moving without a breeze, and my belongings being moved or misplaced, only to reappear where I'd originally left them. My friend believes her elderly roommate's bedroom harbors dark, demonic energy. She attributes this to the woman herself, who is deeply unkind and harbors resentment, especially toward children. My friend wonders if the little girl's spirit remains to protect the apartment from the negativity in the other room. Despite her efforts to cleanse the apartment, the negative energy always returns, as it is attached to the woman rather than the space. One time, while meditating in the living room, my friend heard an unfamiliar female voice say, "Get out of here now." The tone wasn't threatening. It seemed urgent, like a warning. The voice sounded as if it came from above, defying logic, and startled her so much she instinctively looked up. I could never live in this apartment. Even during the day, I feel watched in every room, and the bathroom seems to be the epicenter of the activity. I stay in there as briefly as possible, never lingering longer than necessary. This place is oppressive, filled with overlapping layers of energy. Some sad, some protective, and others dark and malevolent. I wonder if the little girl's spirit will ever find peace or if she will remain here, tied to the apartment, indefinitely. I've experienced many strange, possibly paranormal events in my life, but this one stands out. My memories of this house are dark, and I've tried to forget them over the years. It's been 18 years since I was inside this house, but the experiences I had there are still vivid. The house was rented by the family of my childhood friend, Tim, and I spent a lot of time there when I was around 9 years old. My parents were going through a divorce, and my mom worked full-time, so Tim's mom often babysat me during the summer of 2004. The first time I visited was in December 2003, shortly after Tim's family moved in. A snowstorm had just passed, leaving everything covered in fresh white snow. As we pulled up to the house, I immediately felt uneasy. It was a 2-story Cape Cod-style house, painted a dull mustard yellow. There was a small, cement porch on the side with 2 doors, one leading to the living room and the other to the kitchen. The house wasn't very old, built in the 1950s, but it felt much older to me. That uneasy feeling only grew stronger as I stepped inside. The moment I walked through the door, I was overwhelmed by a heavy, oppressive energy. It followed me everywhere in the house, weighing me down. At first, it wasn't the feeling of being watched. That came later, but it was a constant, unshakable sense that something was wrong. The house itself didn't help. Everything inside felt off. The stairs near the front door were covered in the same mustard-colored carpet as the outside paint. The living room, to the left of the entry, was dark and dreary, with cream-colored walls that had been stained yellow by cigarette smoke. The kitchen, located behind the living room, was painted a sickly lime green that reminded me of vomit. Behind the kitchen was a hallway with the bathroom, an office, and the parents' bedroom. The doors had dark brown frames that clashed with the rest of the house. But the smell was the worst part. It wasn't just the lingering cigarette smoke. It was a deeper, moldy, wet smell that filled the entire house. Upstairs, the smell was sharper, making you feel like you needed to sneeze. While the smell might not have been paranormal, it added to the house's overwhelming sense of wrongness. And that sense only grew stronger the more time I spent there. That first night, Tim and I played in the snow before heading inside. His parents were watching a movie in their bedroom, and we went into the kitchen to warm up. As soon as I stepped into the kitchen, I felt like something was watching me from the dark hallway at the back of the house. When I glanced down the hall, I suddenly felt dizzy and got a headache. I couldn't see anything, but I knew there was something there. I tried to ignore the feeling, but I was uneasy for the rest of the night. I remember little else about that evening except that I was deeply afraid of the hallway. It had an oppressive presence, like the energy in that part of the house was heavier and darker than anywhere else. Tim's dog wouldn't go near the hallway, always stopping right at the edge near the basement door and refusing to move forward, no matter how much Tim's parents tried to coax it. That hallway was the center of the house's strange energy, and the basement seemed to make it worse. The following summer, I spent almost every day in the house while Tim's mom babysat me. That's when the experiences started to intensify. One afternoon, I was sitting at the kitchen table with Tim's mom and his younger sister, Jennifer, who was around 6 years old. Out of nowhere, Jennifer said, "Mommy, I don't want to live here anymore." When her mom asked why, Jennifer replied, "There's a shadow in the house. I see it all the time. It scares me. I just saw it over there," pointing toward the hallway. My heart started racing. I turned to look, and every hair on my body stood on end. The hallway looked darker than usual, and I felt a wave of heaviness wash over me. I couldn't see anything, but I knew something was there. Jennifer's mom got up to check but found nothing. Still, her words stuck with me. Not long after, I began seeing the shadow myself. One night, I stayed over and slept on the living room sofa. From there, I had a clear view into the kitchen and the hallway. I woke up in the middle of the night and saw a dark shadow glide from the kitchen into the bathroom. It had no distinct features, just a human-shaped mass of darkness. Moments later, the dog, which had been sleeping in the kitchen, stood at the start of the hallway and began growling, backing away slowly as if afraid. I pulled the blanket over my head and didn't move for the rest of the night, too terrified to even go to the bathroom. I started noticing the shadow during the day, too. Sometimes, I'd catch a glimpse of it out of the corner of my eye, a dark figure moving between rooms or gliding past someone who wasn't looking. Other times, I'd see it move clearly from one room to another. Everyone in the house seemed to know it was there, but no one wanted to talk about it. It felt like acknowledging it would make it worse. One morning, I woke to the blaring sound of the smoke detector. Tim's dad ran through the house, checking for a fire. He even went into the basement, but there was no fire, just that awful smell of rot. The smoke detectors wouldn't stop until he removed them from the ceilings. That incident left me shaken. Other things happened, too. Once, while changing in the bathroom, the locked door suddenly swung open on its own. Another time, the same door wouldn't open, trapping me inside until it inexplicably released. One morning, I thought I heard movement in Tim's parents' bedroom while I was alone downstairs. I knocked on the door, hearing the sound of drawers opening, the closet creaking, and faint whispers. But when I opened the kitchen door moments later, Tim and his parents were just coming home. They had been out all morning. Their bedroom was empty. When we celebrated Jennifer's birthday, her candles wouldn't blow out. They weren't trick candles, but no matter how hard she tried, the flames wouldn't go out until they suddenly extinguished all at once, as if by an unseen hand. After that, both Tim and Jennifer started having recurring nightmares about the house catching fire. Tim's family moved out later that year, and he and I eventually lost touch. I've driven past the house a few times since then, and every time, I feel the same shivery unease. Looking back, I wonder if the house's energy was tied to fire. The strange placement of doors, the smoke alarms, the candles, the nightmares, they all seem connected. Whatever happened in that house left a mark, and even now, I can't forget it. After hearing about a recent update in the town I grew up in, I felt compelled to investigate. My girlfriend and I decided we had to check it out for ourselves. For context, I grew up in Upton, Massachusetts, a town with its fair share of eerie stories, and my girlfriend grew up in Mendon, its neighboring town. Upton has always been considered creepy by many, and stories like this only add to its reputation. It's worth noting that my girlfriend is highly spiritual, a powerful empath who is deeply attuned to spirits and energies. I, on the other hand, am a skeptic, though I do believe in ghosts. I make a point of trying to disprove anything I encounter before I accept it as paranormal. Together, we've explored various locations in Massachusetts and hope to continue investigating, gaining more experience in the process. This particular night, we set our sights on Mechanic Street in Upton. At about 1 a.m. on December 9th, we arrived at Mechanic Street to follow up on reports we'd heard. Stories described sightings of a woman wearing a colonial-style dress, lacking facial features, and floating while following cars. Intrigued, we drove the route 3 times, first with the radio off, then with it on, and finally we parked to explore on foot. Despite the stories, there was no radio interference or electrical issues during the drives. We decided to park near Fowler Road, where there was space to leave the car without blocking traffic. From there, we walked to the intersection of Mechanic Street and Fowler Road, bringing along a sound recorder, an EMF detector, and a thermal camera. Initially, nothing seemed unusual, no spikes on the devices, no visual anomalies. However, my girlfriend felt a pull toward the bridge over a small brook along Fowler Road. That's when things began to change. When she feels strongly about a location, I rely on her intuition while I work with the equipment. As I stayed near the bridge, I noticed spikes on the sound recorder scale, indicating something audible yet unclear. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, a familiar sensation of being watched. I returned to the car to turn it on, only to have the battery stutter, something that had never happened before. It was a cold night, which might explain it, but given the timing, it felt significant. Listening back to the audio, I heard faint, puzzling whispers, indistinct yet enough to make me head back to the bridge. Before I could leave the car, I saw my girlfriend running toward me with a big grin on her face, illuminated by the headlights. "She thinks we're idiots for staying here," she said. Though skeptical, I've learned to trust her instincts. When I mentioned the whispers, we decided to take a break and drove to a nearby convenience store to regroup. After a short rest, we returned for one last attempt. This time, I left the car running to avoid potential issues and followed her back to the bridge. She described a mental image of a man with a wide grin, a large top hat, and a tuxedo-like outfit. Intrigued, I ventured further, walking down to the brook with my audio recorder. As I reached the water's edge, I decided to engage directly. I called out, "A man in a top hat. How long have you been here?" 5 seconds later, the recorder's scale jumped into the red, something loud enough to hear clearly. I couldn't hear anything in the moment, but the spike on the recorder was undeniable. I immediately stopped recording and played it back. Loud and unmistakable, a voice replied, "A long time." My instincts kicked in, and I yelled to my girlfriend, "Car now!" I sprinted back to the car, adrenaline coursing through me. Meanwhile, my girlfriend was using a spirit box app, a legitimate tool she often uses. As I played the recording for her, the app crackled with static before it clearly said, "It's outside." Her reaction to the audio and the timing of the app's message was enough to send us driving off Fowler Road to Warren Street, both of us too stunned to speak. As we replayed the recording on the drive, we couldn't believe what we'd captured. The voice was clear, and its tone sent chills down my spine. We began piecing together a theory based on what we'd experienced. My girlfriend's intuitive impression of the man in the top hat, combined with the strong response to my question, pointed to a connection between him and the woman reportedly seen on Mechanic Street. We believe the brook on Fowler Road is a key location, and that the man may have played a role in whatever tragedy occurred there. The woman's lack of facial features could symbolize trauma or the manner of her death. It's only been a few hours since we returned home, but we're still processing what happened. I'll continue reviewing the evidence to see if we missed anything, but even now, we're confident this area holds strong paranormal activity. For anyone planning to investigate, we recommend starting at the bridge on Fowler Road. However, please be mindful of the nearby homes and respect the privacy of the residents. This investigation has left us with more questions than answers, but one thing is certain. Mechanic Street and its surroundings are far from ordinary. My husband and I built our house 7 years ago on farmland where he grew up. The land has no known history of war, tragedy, or anything unusual. It's just boring farmland. The house itself is brand new, though it's filled with antiques. I always thought my youngest son might be able to see things, but I assumed, like my older son, that he would eventually grow out of it. Instead, it's only gotten worse as he's gotten older. My youngest, who is 7, sees ghosts everywhere. In the house, in the yard, at the grocery store, even at the hockey rink. He says the ghosts are different colors. Most of the children he sees are blue and see-through. Some are gray, some are black with no faces, and most of them terrify him. A few appear just like us. I've never heard of ghosts appearing in colors like this, and I'd love to know if anyone else has. One particular ghost in our house scares him so much he cries. It's a tall, bald man who stays in the upstairs bedrooms and, according to my son, is not nice. This ghost mocks him and messes with him, especially at bedtime. My son recently begged to move bedrooms because he refused to sleep in his old room anymore. He said the ghosts would get in his face while he tried to sleep, and even hiding under the covers didn't help. Some of them would get under the covers with him. Many nights, he ends up sleeping in our bed. The other night, while lying with us, he suddenly said, "Dad, do you see that man at your door?" My husband said, "No," and my son turned to me with sheer terror in his eyes and said, "There's a guy at your door. He says the ghosts come into our room too, but he feels safer with us there. At times, I've doubted his stories, thinking he might be trying to get attention. But then he came home from a friend's house one day and said, "My friend doesn't believe in ghosts." Worried he might be telling everyone, I gently explained that some people don't believe and that's okay, it's just their opinion. He looked at me seriously and said, "Mom, it was just a cat." Apparently, he sees ghost animals too. He talks about a little girl who plays hide and seek with him around his bedroom door. In his old room, he said 3 figures would come through the wall at night. "They look like vampires," he said. "But they're not. They just try to scare me like vampires." He also says that sometimes they don't want him to see them, but he can still hear them laughing or whispering. Once, he ran downstairs crying, saying someone had spit on him in his old room. He couldn't see the ghost, but his arm was wet, and he was terrified. That was the last time he entered that room, except to move his belongings out. We hoped his new room would be better. At first, he agreed it felt lighter and more comfortable. But as I was helping him organize his books, he suddenly stared into the hallway and said, "There's a ghost in the hall looking at us." I asked, "Girl or boy?" He replied, "Boy, a teenager. He's wearing one of those things Harley, my sister's dog, has around his neck." "A bandana?" I asked. "Yeah, it's red. He looks like a cowboy." The cowboy eventually left, but that night my son came into our room crying again. "I'm not sleeping in there," he said. My bed was shaking. It started slow, then got faster and faster. I tried to calm him, explaining that maybe the bed legs weren't tightened properly, and he reluctantly went back to sleep. The next morning, he said he slept well, except for 2 ghosts in his room. One was the bald man who mocks him. Apparently, this ghost climbed into a Spider-Man web hanging from the ceiling and put his face through the holes, staring at my son. The second ghost was behind the bookshelf, where there's a small hole in the drywall. My son had never mentioned this ghost before. We've had strange experiences for years, even in our old house. Things disappearing, lights turning on and off, floor creaks when no one was there. My oldest son had imaginary friends and, at age 3, described the previous owner of our old house, down to his name, and said he died in a motorcycle
accident. We later learned this was true. My oldest no longer believes in ghosts, but my youngest can't ignore what he sees. These ghosts are tormenting him, and it's ruining his childhood. He recently said, "Mom, I think they're trying to tell me stuff, but I don't know what." I believe him. Yesterday, after showering upstairs, my son refused to get dressed there because the bald man was in the bathroom, standing in the tub and watching him. He came downstairs to change, saying the bald man wouldn't follow him there. He said his late cousin, my nephew who passed in 2000, appeared in a blue, see-through form and made the bald man leave. I don't know what these colors mean. I've read that black is bad, but what about blue or gray? When he was younger, he used to see golden figures, but not anymore. Sorry to interrupt. If you're enjoying the story, let me know in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more. There will always be skeptics who dismiss stories like mine, but I swear on my life that what I experienced was real. These events cemented my belief in spirits and the afterlife forever. Before all this, I didn't believe in ghosts. That changed when my family moved into a nearly condemned house. It was a fixer-upper in the truest sense of the word. Big city, little money, you know the deal. We didn't find out until after we moved out that there had been a murder in that house. We spent almost 2 years working tirelessly to make the house beautiful. It was huge, with lots of windows, perfect for heating and cooling, and it was practically a steal since our landlady lived next door. Despite its charm, the setup wasn't ideal. My sister and I had to share a room. Another sister lived in the basement. My brother got his own room for a while, and my parents shared a room. But we grew to love it. The house became bright and warm, a perfect space for our large family. Things didn't take a turn until we cut down the massive pine tree in the backyard. I don't know why, but I believe that tree was connected to the spirits lingering in the house. I've since learned that spirits don't like changes to their environment. After the tree came down, strange things started happening, events I couldn't explain. At first, they were small, unexplainable occurrences. My sister and I shared a room near the landing of the stairs, and we'd occasionally hear someone call my name from downstairs. At first, I assumed it was a trick of sound or my imagination, but the voice kept calling even when no one was home. I never felt scared, just confused. The real turning point came one night when I was lying awake while my sister was fast asleep. I felt a sudden weight press down on me. The room filled with the sound of heavy breathing. I couldn't move, couldn't cry out, couldn't even breathe properly. After what felt like an eternity, the presence lifted. I realized then that whatever was in the house had focused on me. The voice started calling my name from just outside my door, or sometimes from right behind me. It never called my sister's name, only mine. One afternoon, I was home alone and decided to experiment with our new computer, a Christmas gift. It had a voice recorder feature, so I let it run in total silence to see what it would capture. When I played it back, I heard something chilling, a faint, pitiful cry of no, don't. It sounded like a woman pleading. I knew I hadn't heard it while recording, and the house had been eerily quiet. No bird noises, no creaking floorboards, nothing. When my family got home, I played it for them. They brushed it off, claiming it must have been a car driving by or some weird computer glitch. But the windows had been closed, and we lived far enough from the road that outside noise never reached us. My mom suggested it might have been the heat vent, but heat vents don't cry for help. I knew what I'd heard, and no one could convince me otherwise. A few weeks later, I saw her. I was in the basement putting laundry in the washer. My sister's basement room was adjacent to the laundry area, separated only by a table and a chair pushed against the washer. As I bent down to pick up clothes, I saw a figure in the chair out of the corner of my eye. When I looked directly at it, the chair was empty, but her image was seared into my mind, a young woman with long, straight, dark hair reaching the middle of her back. She wore a red V-neck shirt and a black leather skirt that ended just above her knees. Her skin was light, and she had a modern look, not the kind of spirit you'd expect from hundreds of years ago. Her face was blurred, but her clothes were vivid and clear. She vanished so quickly, yet I'll never forget what I saw.
One night, during a gathering with friends, my sister and I were playing with a new digital camera. We took group shots and funny poses. When we uploaded the photos, there was an extra picture. It wasn't numbered like the others and appeared between frames 17 and 18. In it, a faint outline of a girl with long dark hair, wearing a red shirt and black skirt, sat on the couch. Her feet were blurry, and the image was out of focus, but I recognized her immediately. It was the same girl I'd seen in the basement. I started calling her Christy. Not for any particular reason, the name just popped into my head one day. The discovery of her photo unnerved us all. Not long after, my family decided to sell the house and move somewhere bigger. A week after we moved, my mom handed me a newspaper clipping from 1993. She apologized for not believing me and told me to read it. The article detailed the tragic murder of a 17-year-old girl, Tiffany Catherine Postel. Her drunken father had shot her in the face with a shotgun during an argument in our house. The photo in the article was a school portrait of Tiffany. She had long, straight, dark hair and wore a red V-neck shirt. If the picture had shown more, I would have bet she was also wearing a black leather skirt. I can't shake the feeling that Tiffany, was reaching out to me for help. She wasn't malicious, but she was desperate, and I was the one she chose to ask. I wish I'd known how to help her. If I could go back, I would. I was about 7 or 8 years old when my father, who worked midnights at Ford Motor Company, began experiencing something strange. He would come home late at night or early in the morning, tired but hungry. One morning, he decided to make himself a sandwich in the kitchen. As he worked, he heard heavy footsteps coming toward him from the hallway. Assuming it was one of us, my brothers, my mother, or me, getting out of bed, he walked down the hallway to check. But when he looked into our rooms, we were all sound asleep, snoring. Thinking he must be so tired he was hearing things, my dad returned to his sandwich. A few minutes later, he heard the footsteps again. This time he called out, "Diane! Diane!" for my mom. When there was no response, he walked back to the hallway, only to find everything just as it was before. quiet with nothing out of place. Feeling a little uneasy but brushing it off, he went back to the kitchen. Then the footsteps started again. Frustrated, he jokingly shouted, "Knock it off, George!" To his surprise, the footsteps stopped immediately. From that day on, whenever something strange happened, lights flickering, touch lamps turning on and off, TVs powering on by themselves, our family would laugh and say, "Knock it off, George." If a few weeks went by without any disturbances, we joke that George was on vacation. Our family has experienced many odd occurrences over the years. One such story comes from when my mom was younger. Her father asked her to turn off the basement light before bed, so she ran down and switched it off. But later that night, she was woken up by his booming voice demanding she turn it off again. Confused, she insisted she already had, and my grandmother confirmed she'd seen her do it. Yet when they checked, the light was back on. This time, instead of yelling at my mom, her father angrily shouted at the ghost. My mom often found herself alone at home after school, spending her afternoons playing in the basement. One day, she left an apple down there while she went upstairs to grab something. When she returned just minutes later, the apple was gone. Only the core remained. Another time, while walking up the basement stairs, my mom glanced back and saw a woman standing under the stairs. She described her as having musty white hair, tattered clothing, and an unsettling presence. Terrified, she bolted up the stairs faster than ever. Later, after looking through old family photos, she realized the woman she saw was her great-great-grandmother, someone she'd never seen before that moment. Years later, when my mom was married and raising children, the strange occurrences continued. One day, she was cleaning the kitchen when she heard a loud noise coming from my brother's bedroom. Both boys were still in cribs, far too young to crawl out or cause any kind of commotion. Their room was small, with no windows, so there was no chance of wind or an intruder. When she went to investigate, she found the top layer of her wedding cake in the middle of the floor. What made it truly bizarre was that the cake had been stored in a closed closet, on top of several other items. The closet door was still shut, with everything else untouched. Another chilling experience happened while my mom was driving with her then-husband. As they approached railroad tracks, she saw a car sitting sideways on the tracks with a woman inside. The woman stared directly at my mom, her face filled with despair. My mom screamed, urging her husband to stop the car and help. But her husband just stared at her, confused, and calmly said, "There's no car. There's no woman. Diane, are you okay?" My mom looked back at the tracks, and the car, the woman, they were gone. She was left shaken and questioning what she'd seen. These experiences left a lasting impression on our family. George, or whoever or whatever was behind these events, became a permanent part of our story. Even now, we still find ourselves wondering what else might be out there, unseen but very much present. This is a story I can still remember vividly. As a child, we often took trips out of state to visit family. These trips were always fun because I got to play with my cousins and see relatives I hadn't seen in a long time. But one trip to Michigan stands out, and not for a good reason. The circumstances of this visit made it unforgettable. My mom had an aunt, someone not often talked about in the family. The reasons varied, but mainly it was because she dabbled in black magic or witchcraft, what my mom would call brujeria. Aunt Trini wasn't very popular among our relatives, but when she passed away, we had to go and pay our respects. When we arrived in Michigan, we needed a place to stay, and the only option was Aunt Trini's house. It was a small 2-bedroom house, with one room occupied by her grandson, who had been living with her. That left the other room for my parents, my younger brother, and me to share. At first, everything seemed fine, but things started to get strange the night my brother and I went to bed. As energetic kids, we didn't want to sleep and kept finding excuses to stay awake. We started playing I Spy. My brother took his turn and said, "I spy something black. I spy something black with yellow eyes. I spy something black with yellow eyes that purrs." I immediately guessed, a cat, and started looking around for it. Sure enough, there it was, at the top of the bed, staring down at us. My brother and I were excited and started playing with the cat. We made so much noise that my mom came in to scold us. When she asked why we weren't asleep, we told her we were playing with the cat. She looked at us and said, "There's no cat in this house. Go to sleep." As soon as she left, we overheard her cousin telling her something that would send chills down my spine later. He explained that there had been a cat in the house years ago, but it had died. After its death, Aunt Trini used her magic to bring it back to protect the house and herself. My mom, horrified, told her cousin to keep this from us. That night, my mom stayed up with her cousin, catching up on old times. She later told me what happened next. She saw the cat coming down the stairs. At first, it seemed normal enough, but as it descended, it began to change. She watched in disbelief as the cat transformed into a man, walking confidently down the stairs. Then, as it climbed back up, it shifted back into a cat. When my mom confronted her cousin about it, he admitted that Aunt Trini had cast a spell on the cat, giving it the ability to change into a man. This way, no one would find it strange if they saw her talking to what appeared to be a man instead of a cat. For the rest of our stay, the house felt oppressive. We saw strange things. Passing by mirrors, we would catch glimpses of Aunt Trini's reflection even though she was no longer alive. At night, we'd hear voices coming from her empty room, and the cat would often sit and stare at us, its eyes shifting colors in a way that didn't feel natural. When we finally left, none of us ever returned to that house. My mom's cousin tried to sell it years later but could never find a buyer. People touring the house reported feeling cold spots in certain rooms, a deep chill that couldn't be explained. Some even mentioned the unsettling sensation of being watched. It's hard to believe, I know, but I think Aunt Trini found a way to hold onto the home she cherished so deeply, even after her death. When I was 3 years old, my parents bought their first house. Now, at 37, with a house and family of my own, I still vividly remember the experiences we had there. The first encounter I can recall happened when my younger brother was born. I was 5 at the time and we shared a bedroom. One night, my mother came into the room to check on him and saw an elderly woman standing next to his crib. This wasn't an isolated incident. We would see or sense this woman on many occasions afterward. All we knew was that an elderly woman had previously owned the house, but we didn't know much about her. When I was 8, my parents added a large extension to the home. Strangely, while the sightings continued, they were always confined to the original parts of the house, never in the new addition. We'd see her in the bedrooms, the kitchen, and the dining room, but she never ventured into the newer areas. Years later, when I was in my early 20s, I brought my husband and young son to visit my parents for the first time. My husband had no idea about the house's history or the experiences we'd had. During our week-long stay, we left him home alone one afternoon while we went shopping. It was broad daylight. When we returned, we found him sitting on the porch, visibly shaken. He took me aside into the bedroom and explained what had happened. While watching TV in the older part of the house, the TV suddenly turned off. He turned it back on, but it happened again. Annoyed, he went to turn it back on a second time when he heard banging on the outer wall of the house near the TV. He dismissed it as possibly an animal. But then, as the TV came back on, he heard the distinct sound of several people walking in through the back door into the kitchen. He also heard cupboard doors opening and closing. Thinking we had returned, he yelled out, "You're all back already?" But there was no answer, and everything went eerily quiet. That was enough for him. He grabbed his things and waited outside for us to come back. When he told me what had happened, I decided it was time to tell him about the house's history. I explained the activity we had experienced over the years and told him I planned to wake him up in the middle of the night to witness something himself. I gave him one simple instruction. When I woke him, he was to look at a specific corner of the bedroom and remain silent. A couple of nights later, I woke him. He sat up and did exactly as I had asked. For a moment, there was nothing. Then there she was. After a few seconds, she disappeared. I turned to him and described what I knew he'd just seen. A woman in her 70s, about 4 feet 7 inches, wearing a dark nightgown. Her dark gray hair was pulled back into a loose bun. His jaw dropped. I had described her perfectly, exactly as he'd seen her, and he was left speechless. To this day, activity still occurs in that house. My parents occasionally mention lamps turning on by themselves or strange noises echoing through the older parts of the home. The woman, whoever she is, seems content to linger, quietly sharing the space with us. When I was about 12 or 13, I began seeing something, or rather, someone. He was a short man, standing around 4.5 feet tall. He wore a burlap vest and long pants that were torn off just below the knee. His proportions resembled that of a little person, but his movements didn't match. He moved with the fluidity of a proportional human. At first, I'd catch glimpses of movement out of the corner of my eye, subtle and fleeting. But one day, the sightings became more defined. I was heading to my parents' bathroom to grab something when, about 5 or 6 feet from the door, I stopped. There he was, leaning casually against the doorway with his arms crossed, one leg over the other. His stance was unnerving but not necessarily evil, at least not that I could detect. Usually, he would appear briefly and vanish before I could get a proper look at him. But this time, he lingered. I stood frozen, not out of fear, but sheer bewilderment. Then, in a blur of motion, he bolted directly across my line of sight, moving abnormally fast. He took a sharp turn, suddenly positioning himself mere inches from my face. He began muttering something in a loud, hurried whisper, but I couldn't understand a single word. When he finished, he paused for a moment, then vanished. Though he had been so close, I couldn't make out any distinct details of his face, just vague impressions. A nose, eyes, mouth, and a shadowed countenance. It was as if his features resisted being fully seen. This incident didn't frighten me, but it stayed on my mind for years. After that encounter, he didn't reappear until I was around 17. As before, I would catch glimpses of him in my peripheral vision. Every time I tried to focus on him, he would disappear before I could get a proper look. I never told anyone about these experiences out of fear of being ridiculed. When I was 19, I finally confided in a close friend. To my surprise, he didn't laugh or dismiss me. Instead, he shared a similar story of his own. He described seeing a tall figure around 7 feet tall, wearing a burlap jacket instead of a vest. His encounter had occurred on the side of the road while traveling back to his home state of Alabama. Knowing someone else had experienced something similar made me feel less alone and more open about the subject. The most recent and vivid encounter happened just a few months ago, in mid to late August 2007. I was driving home from work at around 10:30 p.m. The stretch of road I was on was deserted. No houses, no cars, just my headlights piercing the darkness. Out of nowhere, he appeared, walking slowly across the road about 8 feet in front of my car. What struck me most was how his pace seemed synchronized with mine. Though my car was moving, I didn't get any closer to him. He reached the other side of the road and, as before, vanished into thin air. Now, at almost 20 years old, I still see him occasionally. He always appears in my peripheral vision, fleeting and elusive. I've heard these entities referred to as in-betweens because they often appear in doorways or passageways, places that exist between one space and another.
I'm currently a freshman at Eastern Michigan University, not far from Detroit. My roommate and I live in one of the freshman dorms. It's not exactly a new building, but I never thought much about it. I moved in first and spent about a week there alone back in August. During that time, nothing unusual happened. No strange noises, no cold spots, no eerie feelings. I absolutely loved living there. Things changed about a month into the semester. My puppy passed away, and I was devastated. My parents brought me home to say goodbye before we took her to the vet. I kept her collar and brought it back with me to college, clasping it around my bunk bed as a way to remember her. For days, I was too upset to focus and spent most of my time sleeping. Eventually, the raw grief began to fade, but that's when the strange occurrences began. It started on a cold morning in November. I had slept in until about 11 a.m. and decided to check my email. Afterward, I closed everything on my laptop and locked the door behind me. My roommate was in class and wouldn't be back until around 1 p.m. Before leaving for the shower, I placed my sweatpants on top of my laptop and took the rest of my clothes with me. When I returned, things were off. My sweatpants weren't where I'd left them. They were neatly folded and placed under my desk. I stood there puzzled, trying to figure out how they got there. The door had been locked, and we didn't have suite mates. I brushed it off, telling myself maybe they had fallen, somehow folding themselves neatly in the process. But that wasn't all. When I looked at my laptop, Google was open. Someone had searched SI for you. The results were strange, mostly in other languages, but nothing particularly sinister. Feeling a bit uneasy, I waited for my roommate to get back and told her about what had happened. She searched SI for you, again, getting the same results. We laughed nervously, joking about how sweatpants couldn't possibly open a browser, type a search query, and then jump off the desk. Still, we decided to leave it at that. Later that month, right before Thanksgiving break, I was alone in the dorm again. My roommate had left earlier in the day, and my dad wasn't picking me up until the next morning. I stayed up working on homework, so I wouldn't have to think about it over the break. Then I heard music. At first, it was faint, and I couldn't tell if it was coming from my room or somewhere else in the building. But then it got louder. Much louder. I realized it was coming from my roommate's radio/alarm clock on her dresser. The song playing was Who Knew by Pink. Confused, I went over to turn it off. The switch was already set to off. My next thought was to unplug it, but when I tugged on the cord, the plug came loose in my hand. It wasn't even plugged into the wall. Feeling unsettled, I flipped the switch to on, hoping it might stop. Instead, the music grew deafening, almost painful. I panicked and removed the battery. Only then did it stop. The next day, when my roommate returned, I warned her not to be surprised if she found the battery sitting on her dresser. I told her about the incident and assumed there must have been some kind of technical glitch. But then she said something that sent chills down my spine. "That's strange," she said. "The battery isn't strong enough to power the radio, just the alarm." I thought the radio was broken because it wouldn't turn on unless the whole thing was plugged into the wall. This happened in the 1980s when my sons and I lived in a rundown trailer park. It wasn't a great place. Crime, drugs, and violence were common, but it was all I could afford at the time. My friend Cheryl and I often walked around the park at night, especially during the summer. The trailers were hot, and the night air felt cooler. We'd walk past trailer number 350 often, and while I didn't think much of it at first, one night, I stopped mid-step and told Cheryl, something bad has happened, or is going to happen in that trailer. Cheryl suggested we tell the park manager. We did, and she brought 2 of her workers to check it out. They knocked on the door, and a woman answered, saying everything was fine. They left, and Cheryl and I continued our walk, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Over the weeks, I couldn't stop thinking about trailer number 350. Day or night, every time I passed it, I felt uneasy. I kept telling the park manager, but after a few more inspections that turned up nothing, she stopped listening to me. Cheryl thought I was overreacting and told me to let it go, but I couldn't. That trailer gave me the chills. One summer night, Cheryl and I were walking as usual when I spotted something. "Did you see her?" I asked. Cheryl looked confused. "Who?" I pointed to the window of trailer number 350. "The woman in the window. She looks so sad." Cheryl glanced but saw nothing. I insisted, but she brushed it off, saying I was imagining things. Winter came, and our walks became less frequent. Still, whenever we passed trailer number 350, I felt the same dread. I tried not to mention it anymore because it frightened Cheryl, but the unease lingered. When spring arrived, we resumed our walks more regularly. One warm night, I suddenly asked Cheryl, "Do you smell that?" She said no. "There's a terrible odor coming from that trailer," I said. She told me not to bring it up to the park manager again since she'd stopped taking us seriously. I didn't push it, but the smell stuck with me. The odor grew stronger over time. One day, as I walked past trailer number 350 to pick up my son from the bus stop, I stopped in front of the window. There she was again, the sad woman, staring at me. When I looked away and glanced back, she was gone. I told Cheryl, but she told me to stop thinking that way.
Eventually, the smell became unbearable. I had to close my windows because the stench seeped into my trailer. My neighbors on either side of number 350 said they couldn't open their windows either. One day, the The three of us approached the trailer to investigate. The smell was overwhelming, making one of my neighbors throw up. "What do you think it is?" I asked. "It smells like something dead," one replied. I agreed. We told the park manager about the smell. At first, she dismissed us, thinking I was making things up again. But after hearing complaints from others, she finally decided to act. With 2 workers, she went to trailer number 350. They knocked, but no one answered. One of the workers forced the door open, and the stench that poured out was indescribable. Everyone covered their noses as the manager and her workers went inside. Moments later, they stumbled out, pale and gagging. Inside, near the door, they found a woman's body. She appeared to have bled to death after an abortion. In the back bedroom, they discovered a horrifying scene. Mattresses soaked with dried blood and over 50 fetuses in various stages of development hidden underneath. Some were fully formed, babies who could have survived, but instead were left to die. The police arrived and began their investigation. The trailer was deemed a biohazard, and its contents were thoroughly documented before being hauled away and burned. When the police showed a sketch of the dead woman to the park residents, I felt faint. It was her, the woman I had seen in the window. She had a distinct mark on her left cheek, like a crescent-shaped bruise or birthmark. I realized she must have been near death or already dead when I first saw her. Perhaps she was trying to draw attention to the trailer, desperate for someone to uncover what was happening there. The police confirmed that she had bled to death and had been dead for some time. After the trailer was removed, the lot sat empty. New trailers were occasionally moved onto it, but none stayed for more than a few months before being relocated. Whenever I walked past the empty lot, I'd get chills, even on the hottest days. Cheryl's neighbor, Mary, not her real name, said she sometimes heard a baby crying, only to find her own child sound asleep. Though I never heard the cries myself, I believed her. That trailer park was a nightmare. It was filled with crime. Drug dealers, prostitutes, pimps, and violent offenders. Shootings, stabbings, and abuse were regular occurrences. Children were endangered, animals were mutilated, and every day felt like a battle for survival. Eventually, I saved enough money to move my family out of that hellhole and into a peaceful country home. I've never looked back. To this day, I won't go near that park, even though it's still there. It's only gotten worse over the years, becoming the most dangerous trailer park in the county. Cheryl and I sometimes talked about the feelings I had before everything was uncovered in trailer number 350. She admitted that I'd sensed something no one else had. The park manager, who had dismissed me for so long, finally realized the horrors that had been hidden in the trailer. But it was too late for the woman I saw in the window, and for all the others who had suffered there. And no, don't ask me to go back. I'd only return if I were fully armed, in a tank, and wearing bulletproof gear from head to toe. At the time I was searching for an apartment, my daughter also needed to move out of hers. I found what seemed like the perfect place. A large house that had been converted into several apartments. We toured one on the lower right side of the house. We parked in the back and entered through a spacious kitchen. I fell in love with it immediately. To the right of the kitchen was a long, narrow bathroom, and to the left was a cozy living room. Adjacent to the living room was an extra-large master bedroom. The moment I stepped into that room, I felt an unsettling, eerie sensation, but I brushed it off as nothing. On the opposite side of the living room was a smaller room with beautiful French doors. When I learned that my daughter's boyfriend would also be moving in, I gave them the master bedroom and took the smaller room with the French doors for myself. Strange shadows begin. About a month later, I started noticing something unusual. From time to time, I would see a shadowy blur, or more accurately, a gray fog, rushing past the door inside the master bedroom. I suspected it might be a spirit and chalked it up to the cemetery just a block away. It didn't frighten me, and since neither my daughter nor her boyfriend mentioned anything unusual, I didn't think much of it. The encounter at dawn. One morning, around 5 a.m., I got up to go to the bathroom. As I walked through the living room, I saw something that made me stop. Emerging from the master bedroom was a shadowy figure, shaped like a mythical imp. It hobbled clumsily, its right hind leg and left front leg shorter than the others, giving it an uneven gait. I was used to seeing shadowy figures by this point, so I paid it little attention at first. But after realizing I had forgotten something in my room, I turned back and noticed the figure seemed to retreat slightly. When I retrieved my item and headed back to the living room, the imp-like figure was now positioned in front of the master bedroom door. It moved as if aware of me, staying exactly opposite me in the room. Each time I stepped forward or back, it mirrored my movements. That's when it hit me. I had never been so close, just 2 arm lengths away, to one of these shadowy figures, and I had never seen one shaped like this. It had the body of a large animal, like a lion, with an unkempt mane, a long tail and no visible fur. It wasn't glowing or ominous, but I couldn't shake the unease of being this close to something unknown. I froze, torn between curiosity and fear. What if it had glowing red eyes? What if it looked at me? Would it attack? The creature itself didn't seem aggressive, but the unknown was unsettling. Finally, I summoned my courage and turned to look directly at it. It didn't react. Instead, it froze in place, almost like it was playing dead. It reminded me of a child thinking, if I don't move, maybe she won't see me. For a moment, I studied it. The shape was clear, like a lion crouching on all fours, but it wasn't detailed, just a shadowy mass. No glowing eyes, no fur, nothing to make it seem real. It just was. The imp disappears. After about 30 seconds, I turned my head slightly but kept the figure in my peripheral vision. As I moved toward the bathroom, it moved toward my room. If it continued on its path, it would have passed straight through the wall and into my space. When I finished showering and dressing, I cautiously opened my door, expecting to feel or see something strange. But my room felt completely normal. The figure was gone. I saw it again several times after that, always rushing through the living room at different times of the day. The presence didn't frighten me but left me curious about what it was. A shared experience? One day, I asked my daughter if she had ever seen anything unusual in the apartment. She nodded and described seeing a huge dog. I didn't ask her where she'd seen it, whether she was alone, or if anyone else had witnessed it. I wish I had. It might have answered some of my lingering questions. Reflections. Even now, I can't forget the imp-like shadow I encountered. I've always believed my family has a gift of sight, an ability to sense or see the paranormal. This experience was unlike anything I'd ever had before or since. While it never harmed me, it reminded me how much of the world remains a mystery, waiting to be uncovered. My parents were debating whether to sell our beautiful bungalow and move into a cement brick ranch on Mulberry Street. The house had belonged to my Uncle Al, who had recently passed away, and the family offered to sell it to us at a very low price. At first, I wasn't thrilled. Something about the house always gave me the impression it might be haunted. While it probably wasn't, its deep connection to our family's history made it feel heavy with memories. The house was built in the 1950s, along with many identical homes on the block. My grandparents were the first residents, raising 8 children there, my mom being the youngest and one of only 5 still living. The family had experienced its share of tragedy within those walls. My grandfather passed away from cancer when my mom was just 8 years old. She was the one who found him, black and blue, still clinging to life. Years later, my grandmother also succumbed to cancer, living her final days in what is now my bedroom. The house also witnessed the decline of my Uncle Jim, who was found gravely ill on the living room couch before passing away in the hospital. Most recently, my Uncle Al spent his last moments in the house. He and my Uncle Dave, who had died just months earlier, had been inseparable. The thought of moving into a home steeped in so much loss was unsettling. Our current house was just a busy street away from Uncle Al's, so the move would be easy and cost-effective. We'd make more from selling our bungalow than we'd spend on the new place. Despite the practicality, none of us were fully ready to leave. The dream. One night I had a strange dream. I found myself inside Uncle Al's house. It was dark except for the glow of the computer room, which now held a bed, a dresser, some luggage, and my parents, who were talking quietly. Feeling thirsty, I made my way into the kitchen. "Is that you, Dave?" I froze in the doorway to the living room. That voice, it was unmistakable. My Uncle Al. Sitting in his chair, legs up, newspaper open, pipe in his mouth. I could even smell the faint scent of his tobacco. His hair was thick, his glasses perched on his nose, and he was dressed exactly how I remembered him. Dark blue jeans, white tennis shoes, and a black t-shirt with a pocket for his pipe. I couldn't move. My heart pounded as my mind raced. How could this be? He's dead. I watched them seal his coffin in the tomb. But there he was, as real as ever, alive in the living room. "Dave, is that you?" he asked again, not looking up from his paper. I didn't respond. My mind screamed that this couldn't be real, but my feet stayed rooted to the floor. I could have told him I loved him, told him how much I missed him, but all I could do was stand there silently, paralyzed by fear and disbelief. For a moment, I felt as though he didn't even realize it was me. He thought I was Uncle Dave. Finally, I mustered the courage to bolt. I ran to the computer room, where my parents were still talking, and tried to explain what I had just seen. "Uncle Al is in the living room. He's sitting there, reading the paper." But as I tried to get the words out, I woke up mid-sentence. The connection. Realizing it had been a dream, I stepped out of my room to get a glass of water. To my surprise, my mom was also up. We stared at each other for a moment, both looking a little dazed. "I just had the strangest dream," I began. She gave me a long look before responding. "Me too. I dreamed about Al. He was sitting in his living room, reading the paper. He asked me how I liked his house. For a moment, neither of us said a word. A chill ran down my spine. The vividness of my dream, the details of Uncle Al sitting in his chair, his presence so real. I wasn't alone in experiencing it. My mom had seen him too, in her own dream, sitting exactly as he had in mine. Even now, I can't fully explain what happened. Was it just a coincidence? Or had Uncle Al found a way to reach out to us, ensuring we'd feel his presence in the home he loved? Whatever the truth, that moment solidified my connection to the house and reminded me of the deep ties we share with those we've lost. I don't believe my house is haunted. There are no unexplained noises, no apparitions, and I never feel the slightest bit uncomfortable anywhere. Not even in our newly finished basement. But apparently Lily does. After my first dog, Susie, passed away suddenly in the backyard while I was at school, my parents got me a new puppy, a tiny Yorkshire Terrier I named Lily Sue, in honor of Susie. Lily is small enough to fit in my cupped hands, weighing barely 5 pounds, with a little white tuft of fur on her belly. Despite her size, she's fearless, often barking at much larger dogs, though she's really just a sweet, harmless little thing. Recently, though, Lily started barking at seemingly nothing. Her outbursts were usually followed by whimpering and a mad dash out of the room. At first, I thought nothing of it. Dogs bark for no reason all the time, right? But then things started to get weird. The barking begins. One afternoon, I let Lily in from outside, and she immediately walked to the edge of the landing, facing the basement. She stood there, staring intently. I assumed she had spotted a sock or a stray piece of clothing, her favorite toys, to steal from the laundry basket. But there was nothing there. The laundry
basket was empty. Yet Lily began to growl. Her growling grew more intense, becoming as fierce as a tiny Yorkie could manage. I decided to grab her and head upstairs, hoping she'd calm down. She did, but only for a while. About 20 minutes later, while she was napping on my bed, Lily suddenly woke up and fixated on my closet. Barking erupted again. Thinking there might be something there to catch her attention, a dangling string or a dust bunny, I checked the closet. There was nothing. Lily seemed uneasy as I poked around, almost scared and a little sad. She eventually quieted down, but that night, as I was getting ready for bed, the barking started again. This time, she not only barked but growled and jumped up and down on my bed, staring at the closet like something was inside. I inspected it again, found nothing, and told her to calm down. She stopped barking but kept her eyes locked on the closet, occasionally whimpering, occasionally looking at me, and pawing at the bed as if to say, I want out of here. When my dad got home from work, she eagerly left to sleep in his room. Memories of Susie. At this point, I started to feel uneasy. Not because of anything I saw or felt, but because Lily's behavior reminded me of something similar Susie had done. I recalled a morning before school when I was straightening my hair in front of my mirror. Susie had been lounging on my bed, but suddenly sat up and growled at the wall behind my desk. She refused to walk near it and whimpered when she realized her only escape routes were blocked. Unlike Susie's one-time reaction, however, Lily's behavior was recurring and growing more intense. A sleepless night. Later that night, I brought Lily back to my room. She squirmed when she realized where I was taking her, but a belly rub calmed her down, and she dozed off in my arms until 3 a.m. That's when she leapt up in a barking frenzy, staring at the closet again. I'd had enough. I jumped out of bed, yelled something incoherent, grabbed Lily, and bolted out of the room. I woke my mom, telling her there was something in my closet. She told me to put Lily back in my room. Reluctantly, I complied, placing Lily in her little bed. A few minutes later, I heard the soft patting of paws on the tile floor, followed by the faint jingling of a collar. I assumed it was Lily moving around, though I noticed how quickly the steps stopped, as if she had frozen. I thought she had settled on the rug outside my mom's room. But when my mom sat up and asked where Lily was, I told her she was on the rug. My mom shook her head. She's not there. Confused, I stepped into the hallway. Lily was in her bed in my room, looking at me wearily. I picked her up and brought her to my mom's rug, but she bolted into the hall and sat there, staring at us with sad, tired eyes. No amount of coaxing could make her stay near that rug. Finally, I brought her to my dad's room, where she stayed for the rest of the night. Exhausted, I fell asleep. The realization. The next morning, something struck me. Lily hadn't been wearing a collar that night. I don't know what Lily saw, or what was in my closet, but it was clear she sensed something I couldn't. Though I still don't believe my house is haunted, I can't shake the memory of Lily's barking and Susie's similar reaction years before. Perhaps there's something in our home that only they could see, something that remains a mystery to me. When I was a child, I often stayed with my Aunt Debbie and Uncle Joe. I was very close to my cousin Jennifer, and their home was a favorite retreat of mine. They had a big pool in the backyard and a spacious deck where Jennifer and I would spend entire days swimming, lounging, and pretending we were grown women instead of two girls aged 6 and 8. It was always a good time. One particular summer day, 2 children, a boy and a girl, came over. I don't remember their names, so let's call them John and Sally Doe for the sake of this story. Jennifer didn't seem to like them much, but Aunt Debbie reminded us to be polite to our guests, so we played together anyway. We sat on the deck drinking lemonade that my aunt had made for us, chatting about whatever kids talk about at that age. John showed off some diving moves in the pool, which my 6-year-old self found impressive. Sally, on the other hand, was quiet and didn't do anything particularly memorable. She had long, mousy brown hair tied back and wore a black one-piece swimsuit with large pink flowers. At least, that's how I remember it. At the time, I may have even had a tiny crush on John, though looking back now, that seems amusing. As evening approached, John and Sally said they needed to leave or risk getting grounded. Jennifer and I walked them to the sidewalk to say goodbye. I stood in front of Sally, while Jennifer faced John. The setting sun made it hard to see, and I felt a little sad as I often did at the end of a fun day.
I happened to glance down at Sally's foot and noticed her toenail was black. Not from nail polish, but from some injury. Curious, I asked her what happened. Sally explained that her dad was mowing the lawn and told her to move, but she hadn't listened, and he accidentally ran over her toe. I remember feeling horrified and asked if it hurt. She told me she'd cried when it happened. Her tone was matter-of-fact, but John remained completely silent. Trying to relate, I shared a story about my best friend Timothy, who had hurt his finger while helping his dad saw wood. Timothy hadn't been seriously injured, but his fingernail had turned black, too. Sally didn't respond much, or at least I can't recall her exact reaction now, years later. After that, John and Sally turned and walked away. Jennifer and I went back to the house, and the day passed like any other. The confusion. 2 weeks later, I was back at my aunt and uncle's house for another visit. One morning, as Aunt Debbie was applying her makeup, I casually asked if she remembered John and Sally Doe. I hoped she'd invite them over again without asking too many questions, as I was painfully shy at the time. Her response wasn't what I expected. Who are John and Sally Doe? Confused, I tried to jog her memory. The two kids who came over to play with Jennifer and me. You made us lemonade. You told us not to be rude. But Aunt Debbie seemed annoyed and asked Jennifer if she'd invited friends over without permission. Jennifer, equally confused, swore she had no idea who John and Sally were. I argued on her behalf, insisting Aunt Debbie had met them herself. The conversation went in circles, but Aunt Debbie remained adamant she didn't know them, and Jennifer insisted she'd never met them. Frustrated and bewildered, I dropped the subject. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. To this day, even now, I can vividly recall John and Sally's visit. The lemonade, John's dives, Sally's story about her injured toe. Yet, to this day, John and Sally don't exist. Aunt Debbie has no memory of them, and neither does Jennifer. I've asked myself many times over the years, who were they? How could two children appear so vividly in my life, only to vanish without a trace? Perhaps I imagined them, but if I did, the memory is far too detailed to feel like a fabrication. Or maybe their visit wasn't as ordinary as it seemed. Whatever the truth may be, I'll never forget John and Sally Doe, even if no one else remembers them. When I was 5 years old, my parents bought an abandoned house in Lincoln Park. It wasn't the type of abandoned house you'd see in movies. No broken windows or ominous overgrowth. But it had its quirks. The grass was neglected, shingles showed more wear than one might like, and the basement was semi-finished but undeniably ugly. The interior wasn't terrible. A bit outdated with deep red, navy blue, and dark green walls that my mom found repulsive. Despite these flaws, it was a decent first house. After 2 weeks of painting and moving in, we finally settled. I was given the smallest room in the house. My parents painted it pink while I was away on a road trip out west. My dad, always artistic, decorated it with a portrait of our family dog, Mickey, sketches of Mickey Mouse, and little red hearts. Above the light switch, he painted, "Brit's room." It was adorable. At first, nothing unusual happened. Life carried on, and the house felt like any other. But that summer, we started receiving mail for children who supposedly still lived there. Odd subscriptions would arrive like a book of fun stamps that had already been paid for. My mom handed them to me instead of throwing them out. I thought it was strange that the previous family hadn't canceled these things before leaving. Even stranger was how abruptly they'd left, abandoning the house instead of selling it. Once, my dad casually mentioned, the realtor said they just couldn't live here anymore and decided to leave. I don't really know why. As a little girl, I had a vivid imagination. I believed my dolls threw parties behind closed doors. The Beast from Beauty and the Beast would sneak into my room at night, and Santa's photograph on my dresser was a magical surveillance device that required flipping face down when I misbehaved. Naturally, my parents chalked most things up to my wild imagination. But the 3 years we lived on Buckingham Drive, our Buckingham Palace, as we jokingly called it, brought experiences that even I couldn't explain away. One day, I was playing at my vanity, pretending to be Snow White. I dug out an old Halloween costume and was making myself pretty. When I heard it, my name, Brittany. At first, it was faint, but it got louder with each call until it became a sharp, Brittany. Startled, I abandoned my princess act and bolted out of my room. I didn't return for hours, camping out on my mom's bedroom floor instead. This wasn't the first time I'd heard someone call my name, and it wouldn't be the last. My parents dismissed it as a neighbor or my imagination, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something, or someone, was trying to get my attention. As the years went by, the strange occurrences increased. My mom worked late shifts at a nearby grocery store and often wouldn't come home until midnight or later. On nights when I couldn't stay awake to greet her, I'd sleep peacefully until something woke me. One night, I opened my eyes to see something hovering inches from my face. It wasn't a person, but an enlarged image of my mom's eyes and nose, stretched wide enough to fill the space above my bed. There was no mouth, yet it felt like she was smiling. Strangely, I didn't feel scared. I stared at it for a moment, unsure of what to do, before shutting my eyes and falling back asleep. The next morning, I told my mom what I'd seen, but she dismissed it as another one of my wild imaginings. The voice calling my name became more frequent, always a female voice. I stopped mentioning it to my parents since they never had any helpful explanations. I tried to convince myself they were right, that it was all in my head, but the unease never went away. Walking out of my room, I'd glance over my shoulder, half expecting to see someone standing there. Outside, I'd hear my name only to find Mickey, our dog, sniffing at the grass. The final straw came after I switched bedrooms with my mom. I decided pink was a sissy color, and that blue suited me better. After the move, most of the strange incidents stopped. The voice became rarer, and the unsettling visions ceased. But one odd event stood out. I had a dream about my veterinarian Barbie set, the one with a plastic dog, cat, and a little white case of medical tools. In the dream, the plastic cat became jealous of the dog and possessed. Its red eyes glared at me before it walked out of my room in a robotic fashion. I woke up slightly creeped out but laughed it off. Then I looked in my Barbie box. The cat was gone. Even after packing and moving, I never found it. It hadn't been thrown away, given away, or stolen, just gone. I moved on, but the oddness of that house stayed with me. Years later, during my senior year of high school, I brought up these memories while talking with my dad in the car. After laughing at my childhood antics, his expression turned serious. "Do you remember your old bedroom?" he asked. I nodded, curious. "Well," he continued, "the realtor told me something I never wanted to tell you or your mom. The previous owner committed suicide in that room. Your old room. I didn't want to scare you, so I kept it to myself. I'm sorry. We never spoke of it again." I live in a dorm on campus at Eastern Michigan University. Strange things tend to happen around my roommate, but I usually brush them off. I grew up in a non-traditional, psychically sensitive family, where I was taught not to fear the paranormal but to respect it. I learned how to protect myself using energy shields, simple incantations, and rituals. This has always felt second nature to me, and I've never truly felt threatened by any presence until recently. During Christmas break, my roommate left the dorm the day after her classes ended. I was staying an extra night and had slept alone in the room before, so I didn't think much of it. That night, however, the atmosphere felt different. I chalked it up to being overtired, closed my eyes, and tried to sleep. As soon as I shut my eyes, I got an unsettlingly clear mental image. An older man standing a few feet from my bed, glaring at me. It wasn't just my imagination. I've seen random mental images before, ranging from unfamiliar faces to elephants in tutus. This one felt different. I opened my eyes, shook off the image, and tried to dismiss it as fatigue. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling of a presence at the foot of my bed, near the doorway. I suddenly remembered I hadn't locked the door, so I reluctantly got up. Crossing that space felt wrong, like something unseen was standing there, watching. I quickly locked the door and jumped back into bed, pulling the covers up. For a few moments, I felt normal again. Years ago, I started learning how to use my energy to influence things. At first, it was pendulums, but over time, I learned to use it in crowded spaces to create a subtle barrier around me. This shield would subconsciously discourage people from getting too close. Over the years, I've become more aware of my energy, my aura, and can often sense changes when someone focuses on me intensely. That night, my energy felt different, like something was interfering with it, tugging at it or drawing it away. This had happened a couple of times at home, but usually, I could stop it by forcefully telling the entity to leave. In my dorm, that tactic didn't work. I tried putting up my protective shield, but it had no effect. The presence at the foot of my bed took shape in my mind. It didn't feel human, it was small yet menacing. The image reminded me of the velociraptors from Jurassic Park. Agile, dangerous, and intelligent. The energy around me felt invasive and sinister. In a final attempt, I imagined an energetic explosion of bright white light, filling the entire room and pushing the presence out. The feeling vanished. The dorm was silent, and I could finally relax. It's been 2 days since I've returned to campus after the break, and so far, everything feels normal. I hope whatever it was is truly gone for good. When I was 9, my parents bought a small 2-story ranch a few cities away from our old house on Buckingham Street. I spent the rest of that summer settling into our new home. My parents gave me the entire upstairs. A light green room with beige carpeting, a spacious walk-in closet, and 2 attic doors, one near the landing and the other directly across from my bed. Felt like my own little kingdom. Like most kids, I had my own TV, which sat on my desk at the foot of my bed. I loved watching Nickelodeon, Disney, and Cartoon Network, and often fell asleep to reruns of Rugrats or Dexter's Laboratory. For some reason, I had a habit of leaving the TV on overnight. For the first couple of years, nothing strange happened. Occasionally, I'd hear my name being called, even at school. But when I finally snapped, yelling for it to shut up already, the voices stopped. We had our little Shih Tzu, Mickey, and eventually got a new dog, Fritz, a white Bichapoo. Fritz was small but energetic, and when he wasn't busy exploring, he occasionally ventured upstairs to visit me. After a while, though, I started noticing something odd. I'd often see a little white dog sitting by my feet or in the middle of the room. Assuming it was Fritz, I'd reach out to pet him, only to find nothing there. At first, I shrugged it off as my imagination, but over time, I began catching glimpses of the dog out of the corner of my eye, even when I knew Fritz was elsewhere. Outside, in the basement or next door. I convinced myself it was just a trick of the mind, a result of being used to having Fritz around. But then things escalated. One night, I fell asleep with the TV on again. Around 2 a.m., I woke to flashing lights and the deep voice of a man. My TV had switched to Turner Classic Movies. I didn't watch that channel, but I assumed I'd rolled over onto the remote. I turned it off and went back to sleep. An hour later, I woke again. The TV was back on, still playing Turner Classic Movies. Frustrated, I moved the remote to the far side of the room and turned off the TV. By 4 a.m., I woke up a third time to find the TV blaring I Love Lucy on Nick at Night. The remote, which I'd placed across the room, was now neatly sitting at the foot of my bed. This time, I shoved it under my pillow and finally managed to sleep without further interruptions. I tried to rationalize what had happened. Maybe I'd sleepwalked or the remote somehow moved on its own. It was unsettling, but I convinced myself it was nothing. The following year, I began hearing my mom's voice late at night. Once, as I played with a pair of sunglasses, I clearly heard her calling to me from the bottom of the stairs. "It's okay, Brittany. Everything will be okay." Her tone was calm, almost reassuring. I walked to the landing, confused, but the voice stopped. No one was there. I checked her room and found her fast asleep. She dismissed my story the next morning, saying I must have imagined it. Things became even stranger when my best friend Dana introduced me to a Ouija board. We started using it in my room, connecting with a supposed spirit named Lilac. At first, it felt like harmless fun, but soon I had a terrifying dream. In it, I saw Lilac glowing white and walking down a dark street. Suddenly, she appeared beside me and grabbed my neck, trying to choke me. A few days later, as I walked down the stairs, I felt pressure on my back, like someone pushing me. I stumbled down a few steps before catching myself on the banister. I wasn't sure if these events were real or the product of an overactive imagination. But one summer day, I was at a friend's house when her grandfather casually mentioned the history of my home. He said, "An old woman used to live there before the family that sold it to you. I think she had a little white dog." Hearing that sent chills down my spine. Could the little white dog I kept seeing have been hers? To this day, I still wonder if she and her dog were somehow still tied to that house.
After my parents divorced, my siblings and I moved in with my mom's parents. My mom and sisters shared her old bedroom, while my brother and I stayed in my uncle's old room. My grandparents were the second owners of the house, and as far as anyone knew, nothing unusual had ever happened there. Back in the 60s, my aunt and grandmother were hairdressers, and they kept one of the old salon chairs with a big dome hairdryer in the house. It was covered in green vinyl and sat upstairs, just outside the bathroom, like a makeshift waiting room. My sister, Jay, loved to read and could get completely lost in a book. One day, she was sitting in the hairdryer chair reading when she heard scratching noises coming from underneath. When we moved in with our grandparents, we had to give up our dog. Grandpa, despite being kind and loving, was firm about having no pets in the house. I always suspected it was because he had to say goodbye to so many animals when he helped his father run a pet store in his youth. He never outright said it. It was always framed as Grandma's dislike for pets, but I think it hurt him too much. He was a World War II veteran, a tough man who had been shot in North Africa, so when he said, "No pets," it meant no pets. He passed away just 2 months after we moved in. Anyway, back to Jay. She paused her reading, set the book aside, and checked under the chair. Her blood ran cold when she saw the Ouija board we'd gotten rid of years ago. She had thrown it away after a particularly creepy session involving a woman in white and the words D.E. read. Yet here it was, as if it had never left. Instead of panicking, Jay called out, "Hey guys, you want to play with the Ouija board?" It was a Saturday afternoon, and our family tradition was to go out for lunch. On days we kids didn't want to go, we'd get Burger King. This time, we stayed behind, not for the burgers, but for the mystery of the Ouija board. We gathered around it, placing our hands on the planchette. Just as Jay began speaking, something in the closet fell with a loud slam. It wasn't a soft thud. It was sharp and startling. In that moment, I felt a chill run down my spine. If I had been a cartoon character, there'd have been a cloud shaped like me left behind as I bolted to the driveway, pounding on the car door, begging to join the family for lunch. What happened after that? I have no idea. Jay and P never spoke of it, and Jay eventually gave the Ouija board to a friend. We never saw it again. The second floor of the house had 2 crawl spaces, both with access points in the girls' room. One ran behind the closet, while the other stretched the length of the house. Sometimes, I'd hear faint scratching from the crawl space near my brother's side of the room, but I always assumed it was squirrels. Newton, after all, is full of them. One night, long after the Ouija board was gone, my brother woke me up, terrified. He'd heard a loud bang in the crawl space and insisted we go to the girls' room to protect them. Half asleep, I followed him, setting up on the floor while he kept watch near Jay's bed. He was clearly scared out of his mind, his head darting back and forth in the dark. Nothing else happened that night, but he was convinced the girls were in danger. The only other strange thing I remember was seeing Baron, a neighbor's dog, walk through the house a day after we learned he had died. After that, nothing unusual ever happened in that house again. I wonder if the odd energy we experienced followed us from Billerica. For a brief time during middle school, I started seeing blobs of colors: greens, blues, yellows, and sometimes pinks. Some of these colors floated freely, while others seemed tethered to people. It only happened at school and stopped entirely once I left. As for later experiences, one that stands out was a prank I pulled on my now ex-wife. We lived on the first floor of an apartment in Tampa, Florida. One day, while she was doing laundry, I flipped all the furniture in the living room, couch, chairs, coffee table, and carefully placed everything back on top of the upside-down furniture. When she returned and saw the scene, she screamed. I rushed out of the bathroom pretending to be shocked, saying, "Well, you always thought this place was haunted." I couldn't hold back my laughter, though, and took her out for dinner to apologize. She always said her grandmother, who passed away on our wedding night, would change the TV channel whenever she watched something her grandmother wouldn't approve of. It never bothered me. Her grandmother apparently liked me more. Her whole family did. Actually, maybe that should have been a sign. After my parents divorced, my sister P had a rougher time than most people. She's a single mother of 2 and was diagnosed with an illness that left her 100% disabled. This was particularly devastating for her because she's always been a workaholic, and now her body won't let her do what she loves. She spends most of her time stuck in her room. Unfortunately, her kids didn't understand why their mom couldn't give them the attention they needed, so they lashed out, becoming selfish and self-serving young adults, though my niece has started turning her life around now. Given her situation, my mom and I decided to get a big enough house to live together and support her. Before, her kids would call us when she had an episode, and we'd rush over from 2 towns away. Living together just made sense. We found a large house with a partially finished basement that I
converted into a one-bedroom apartment. It had a full bathroom on each floor, including the basement. Jackpot! My mom and sister took the upstairs bedrooms, my niece and nephew got the 2 main floor bedrooms, and I claimed the basement as my own. The house was a Cape Cod-style home with slanted ceilings and a crawl space instead of the menacing closets we'd dealt with in a previous home. The crawl space, however, was packed with all the junk my mom refused to throw away. Living in the basement was challenging at first because the laundry room was only accessible through my small kitchen. Eventually, I closed off the room for privacy. About 3 weeks after moving in, I woke up at 2 a.m. to a bright light coming from the laundry room. Half asleep, I assumed someone was doing laundry. Rude, but plausible. I glanced at the door and froze. There, bathed in light, was a man. He had curly, light brown hair and was dressed in a toga tied at the waist with what looked like a rope. He leaned casually against my kitchen sink, legs crossed, smiling at me as if he were in the middle of a friendly conversation. Before I could react, the light dimmed, and he slowly faded away. I couldn't sleep after that and turned on the TV to lull myself back to sleep. A few nights later, I heard someone call my name. The voice sounded like a girl I knew in 3rd grade. Confused, I opened my eyes and looked at the ceiling, only to see an elbow sticking out of it. Yes, an elbow. Half of the forearm, the elbow, and part of the upper arm were all sticking out. Before I could comprehend it, spiders appeared and carried it away. Yes, spiders. I was wide awake, and no, I don't take any medication. Once again, I relied on my trusty TV to help me calm down. Things changed when my sister and her kids moved out after an argument with my mom. My mom, tired of climbing stairs, moved to one of the main floor bedrooms, and I took the 2 upstairs rooms, one for my bedroom and the other as my living room. But it didn't matter. The man found me again. One night, I heard my dad's voice call my name. I opened my eyes, and there he was, standing over and through me. The same curly-haired man, now without the glowing light, was looking down at me with a kind smile. Panicking, I sat straight up until we were face to face. He didn't fade or flinch. He stayed there, looking at me with that warm smile for a few seconds. I froze, terrified and unsure of what to do. Then, with a short, friendly "ha," he turned, walked out of me, glanced back at the door and dissipated. I haven't seen him since. That was 2 years ago. The spiders, however, are a different story. I see them often, scurrying across the ceiling. Some are enormous, while others are normal-sized. They don't bother me, and I don't bother them. They seem content to vanish into the walls. I've been told spiders bring good luck, so I let them be. None of the things I've seen in this house feel hostile or evil. But waking up with someone standing inside you is unsettling. Oddly, when the man was there, I felt warm and safe, along with alarmed and terrified. It's an experience I'll never forget. Before you read this, I want to say that losing someone you love deeply changes you. It shakes you to your core, challenges your faith, whatever that faith may or may not be, and leaves you raw. That's where I am now. Raw, rocked, and spilling my soul. Take it for what it is. She was young, I am young, and this was a tragedy that felt destined for us. The events I'm about to share are my perception of the truth. I can't tell anymore if all the strange things I've noticed are real or just grief messing with my mind. Either way, it feels heavy. But maybe sharing this will bring some peace. My mother saw my doppelganger several times before she passed away. She passed 7 months ago today, and it's been the hardest year of my life. I know sharing this sounds strange, but honestly, what's the harm? If nothing else, it helps me process and remember. My relationship with my mom was complicated. We loved each other deeply, but she struggled with alcohol for most of her life. That struggle ultimately took her from us. I didn't see her for a year before she passed, and that breaks my heart. I miss her so much now. Looking back, it feels like she always had something dark surrounding her, as if addiction itself was a kind of demon. It's no coincidence they call alcohol spirits. When she was in the hospital, she told my aunt that she had been seeing me. She said I looked beautiful again and told my aunt that I owned a tea shop. My aunt figured this was just confusion from illness or medication, but my mom insisted. She told my aunt I had visited her several times. 4 visits in total, she said. At the time, I wasn't aware of the superstition that seeing a doppelganger is often associated with death. Meanwhile, the real me had been turning my life around. I had recently lost 40 pounds, started working at a diner with a big teacup sign out front, and was finally feeling more like myself. My aunt told me about my mom's visions after she had already fallen unconscious and never woke up. As strange as it sounds, I believe my doppelganger brought her comfort in her final days. She let my mom think I was okay, and my aunt said my mom seemed happy. For that, I'm grateful. As flawed as my mom was, I loved and still love her with all my heart. Knowing she found some peace before passing means the world to me. I only wish I could have seen her one last time and found peace myself. Not seeing her is one of the biggest regrets of my life, but maybe this is a way of coping with that guilt. I don't know. Whatever my doppelganger was, she gave my mom something I couldn't. Maybe she helped both of us in her own way. This is more than just a ghost story. It's a strange, bittersweet memory I'll carry with me forever. I guess I'll never truly know what it all meant. I've been dealing with spirits for a while now, and the main issue is they're incredibly talkative. They love communicating with me and my girlfriend, often through my phone's messenger. Over time, I've grown used to sensing their presence, though my ability to see them has faded. Once, a stranger even called me a clairvoyant, describing my job, location, and details about my life without ever meeting me. A little backstory. I've had moments where I could predict someone's future or learn things about them through these spirits before they even told me. For a while now, though, I haven't been able to sleep much. One of the spirits, Luna, was chatting with me and my girlfriend late into the night. For privacy, I'll keep some of the conversations brief. I've given names to the spirits I've grown accustomed to: Osiris, Luna, Leo, and Phoenix. These are names I chose because they couldn't remember their own. The most recent incident. Just before an accident, Osiris messaged me, saying, "Renoa's heartbeat just increased. Something feels off." Renoa is my girlfriend's nickname. Not long after, my girlfriend sent me a picture of her totaled car. Thankfully, she was fine, shaken but unharmed. Earlier encounters. Years ago, before the spirits became more social with others and preferred to use my phone's memo pad instead of a messenger, I had a strange experience on my way to work. While walking, I opened the memo pad on my phone to jot something down when it started typing on its own. "Careful where you step." 5 minutes later, I stepped in dog poop. Frustrated but still curious, I cleaned my shoes at work and checked the memo again. The original message was gone, replaced with, "Warned you." Instead of freaking out, I tried to set boundaries. I wrote back, "Since you're going to use my memo pad, follow some rules. Okay?" Surprisingly, I got a response, "Okay, Sin." Sin is a nickname I use for myself. I replied, "Don't alter any memos I write unless it's this blank one, and be nice." Luna, who was the only spirit present at the time, agreed. I started asking her questions, her gender, memories, and why she chose me. She answered politely, and while I initially thought it was some kind of hacking incident, it continued across multiple phones, no matter how many password resets or security measures I took. Memorable experiences with Luna. One of the standout moments happened when I was 17 and dating someone named Nina. I knew she was cheating on me but didn't know how to confront her. Luna warned me, saying, "Something's going to happen to her with her other lover." I told Nina, "He's going to hurt you. Just leave him." She denied it at first but later admitted I was right. Though she came back to me, I had finally found the courage to end things. Luna's support became something I relied on. Eventually, Leo joined us, but he wasn't as talkative. He mostly stuck to yes or no answers, with the occasional playful remark like, "You're going to get hurt." Avoid the main road home. I ignored his advice once and ended up in a fight with some bullies. Though I managed to fend them off, I still got hurt when Phoenix and Osiris joined. I can't recall exactly when Phoenix and Osiris appeared. Recent memory loss has made things hazy, but they became part of the group, adding their own dynamics to the conversations. Living with the spirits. It's strange, but I've grown used to their presence. The oddest part is how seamlessly they interact through my devices. Even after countless phones, resets, and updates, they always manage to connect. It doesn't scare me anymore, but it does make me wonder, has anything like this happened to you? This isn't a dream. It's my reality, and while I can't remember every detail, I know these spirits have become a part of my life. My first experience with the paranormal happened when I was 21, living at my parents' home. That night, I had gone out on a date with someone my parents strongly disapproved of. We had argued about this person more than once. When I got home, I went to turn off the outside light. As I flipped the switch, my hand froze midair. In that moment, I heard my deceased grandmother's voice say, "I am very disappointed in you." The clarity of her words left me shaken. I went to bed that night and never went out with that person again. For nearly 20 years, I lived in an apartment in Cumberland, Rhode Island. The place always made me uneasy at night, especially when my husband wasn't home. On nights he went out, I often felt an overwhelming need to leave, almost as if the apartment itself was pushing me out. Some nights, I gave in to that feeling and drove around aimlessly. If I returned before he did, the oppressive vibe would still be there, making me hesitate at the door. On the nights I stayed, I would turn on every light, every television, and every radio in the house to drown out the unease. The apartment's kitchen and bathroom didn't have windows, yet I would often feel cold drafts around my ankles or calves while standing at the sink. It felt as though something unseen was brushing past me. There was no logical explanation. The nearest door was over 20 feet away, and there were no windows or vents nearby. My daughter, meanwhile, spoke of demons and disembodied voices. Though I never saw or heard what she did, her fear was palpable. I tried to reassure her that she was safe, but deep down, I wondered if there was something more to her experiences. After my marriage ended in divorce, the feelings of needing to flee the apartment disappeared. However, strange occurrences continued. My brother gifted my daughter a cat, but the poor thing was restless and terrified. She would run laps around the kitchen table as if being chased and often hid, refusing to sleep alone. She always stayed close to me and my boyfriend at the time, often squeezing into our bed at night. One particular night, the cat nudged me over so tightly against my boyfriend that I had little room to move. Suddenly, the room's temperature dropped sharply, and the chill cut through a thick quilt that normally kept me warm. It wasn't just a draft, it was something unnatural. The most unsettling experience happened while I was at my computer. As I glanced at the whiteboard on my desk, a face materialized within it. Before I could process what I was seeing, a ball of light shot across the room, a part of the room where no natural light could have entered. To make matters worse, I felt as though someone had touched me, even though I was completely alone. Years later, we moved to Massachusetts, where I grew up. The new place had its own share of oddities. Once, as we walked into the apartment, the television turned on by itself. All three of us were still standing in the doorway, and the remote, which had a habit of disappearing, was nowhere to be found. Occasionally, I would smell a strong floral perfume, like lilac or another sweet flower. It was always the same fragrance, and it would come and go without explanation. Another time, I saw a female figure enter my daughter's room. When I followed to check, no one was there. One morning, while driving to work, I suddenly smelled strong men's cologne followed by the overpowering scent of cigarette smoke. It wasn't faint. It was as though someone had blown smoke directly into my face. There was no one else in the car and the windows were up. My last experience happened at work. I saw the Catholic priest assigned to our facility, Father Crowley, rush past the door of my office. He was a round man but surprisingly quick on his feet. I casually commented to a coworker, "Father Crowley is in a big hurry this morning." My colleague turned pale and said, You couldn't have seen him. He passed away last week. Looking back, I can dismiss the first experience with my grandmother as guilt. But as for the others, I have no explanation. These memories stay with me, reminding me that some things in this world are beyond understanding.
My maternal great-grandmother was, by all accounts, a kind but very unique woman. She avoided the sun, believed in old-world superstitions, and even washed my infant grandmother's hair with lemon juice, not just to keep it blonde, but to ward off bad spirits. She was fiercely loyal, once storming into my grandmother's classroom to confront a bully mid-lesson. Though something like that wouldn't fly today, our family still applauds her for standing up for her child. According to my great-aunt, my great-grandmother had a secret, one that she hid from the family and the world. I would stumble upon this secret by chance, and it changed my life forever. Until that day, I didn't believe in the paranormal. I wasn't prepared for what I would experience while researching her life and our family history in my great-aunt's house, the very house where my great-aunt and grandmother grew up in the 1930s. Built in 1890, the house is a two-story folk Victorian with patterned trim, almost like a gingerbread house. It sits on a hill, making the back appear taller than the front. The house has gabled sides, multiple windows with heavy old-fashioned curtains, and a sickly beige exterior with peeling paint. Its porch, sagging and caved in, feels like it might collapse under the weight of a visitor. Approaching it, one could swear the curtains shift on their own, or dark shadows flit behind them. The day after Christmas in 2016, I dropped off my great-aunt, now in her 90s, at her home after a holiday visit. I decided to stay and dig through her collection of old family photographs and heirlooms. I knew little about my great-grandmother's family, only that she had 3 siblings, one of whom died young from tuberculosis, and that her mother was sent back to Portugal from Ellis Island due to illness. I was determined to fill in the gaps in our family history. The house itself was packed with papers, boxes, and random belongings. My elderly great-aunt never threw anything away. As I climbed the front staircase, dread and foreboding gripped me. The dark hallway above seemed to swallow the light. I wasn't allowed to turn on the upstairs lights because the ancient wiring posed a fire hazard. I could barely see anything until I reached the top of the stairs. In the small upstairs room, illuminated by harsh yellow light, I found stacks of boxes filled with photos and documents. For a moment, I felt safe in the bright room. While sorting through the boxes, I found a large photograph from 1905. It depicted a young woman with tightly curled hair, wearing a cinnamon-colored dress and a ruby necklace. Her expression was serene but serious, and her features felt familiar. Written on the back was her name, my great-great-grandmother. A second photograph slipped out of the frame, showing the same woman holding a child. In this photo, her skin was darker, her hair styled differently. This wasn't the image of a European immigrant I had imagined. It spoke to a different, more complex ancestry. Suddenly, pieces of my great-grandmother's life that once seemed insignificant clicked into place. I understood what she had been hiding. As I processed this revelation, I noticed something in the box that made me gasp: the ruby necklace from the photograph. I was certain it hadn't been there minutes earlier. Against every instinct telling me not to, I picked it up. It was beautiful, perfectly preserved, as if brand new. I decided to take it home for my mother, so I placed it around my neck to see how it looked. That's when the atmosphere changed. The once bright room darkened, clouds covered the sky, and the air grew heavy. A sinister hiss whispered from behind me, followed by the chilling words, "It's a lie." The voice was deep and feminine. My heart raced as I refused to turn around. I couldn't face whatever was behind me. Desperate to remove the necklace, I reached for it, but it suddenly felt impossibly heavy. The weight increased exponentially, making it impossible to lift. The clasp was nowhere to be found, and the necklace seemed to tighten around my neck. My panic grew as the pressure on my neck increased, leaving me gasping in pain. Just as I thought I couldn't endure it any longer, the necklace loosened and practically jumped off my neck. I threw it into the box and ran out of the room, my feet barely touching the stairs as I fled. Before I reached the bottom, I heard the voice again, growling, "Just go." Go. When I reached the kitchen, I told my great-aunt about my discovery and the necklace. To my shock, she claimed it was impossible. That necklace, she said, had been buried with my great-great-grandmother in Portugal. When she was sent back from Ellis Island, ill and deemed unfit to enter the country, her belongings were returned with her. She died with that necklace around her neck. I insisted it was upstairs and, despite my fear, ran back to retrieve it. But when I lifted the photograph in the box, the necklace was gone. It had vanished, leaving no trace. As I turned to leave, the attic door creaked open, slowly swinging wider. I didn't dare look back as I ran out of the house. To this day, I refuse to go inside my great-aunt's house, opting instead to wait in my car when I visit during the holidays. Nightmares of being strangled in the attic still haunt me. Oddly, the day I decided to write this story, Facebook reminded me of a photo I uploaded 2 years ago, an image of my maternal great-grandparents. The timing felt like a sign, as if my great-great-grandmother's story wasn't finished. Some secrets, it seems, refuse to stay buried.
Oh, sorry to interrupt. If you're enjoying the story, let me know in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more. Oh. In the summer of 2002, I moved into a small apartment in a quiet town in Massachusetts. After years of living with roommates, this was my first time having a place all to myself. I couldn't wait for the peace and independence. The apartment was on the first floor of an old house that had been converted into 4 units. It had a private garden entrance in the back, and I immediately fell in love with its cozy charm. The first night was everything I'd hoped for. My friends helped me move in, and we celebrated with beer and pizza before they left. Alone at last, I enjoyed a long, hot shower and read a book until I felt sleepy. That night, I had one of the best sleeps of my life. The quiet and independence were wonderful, but the peace didn't last. The next night, things started to change. The house was old, and the closet door in my bedroom was tricky. It wouldn't close properly unless I lifted the doorknob and gave it a firm shove with my hip. Opening it was just as difficult. That night, I drifted off with the same sense of calm I'd felt the night before. Then, in the middle of the night, I was jolted awake by a loud bang. The closet door had slammed open as though someone had kicked it from inside, smacked against the wall, and then slammed shut again. Terrified, I sat frozen in bed, staring at the now-closed door. I couldn't bring myself to move or turn on the light for at least 15 minutes. When I finally mustered the courage to turn on the light, I left it on for the rest of the night. Over the following weeks, the closet door continued to swing open and slam shut at random. But that wasn't all. Lights began turning on by themselves in the middle of the night. Doors locked on their own. My stereo would turn on and off or switch stations at will. I came home from work one day to find all the cabinet doors in the kitchen wide open. The activity only increased, and I was at a loss for what to do. One Friday night, I had a friend over for dinner and shared my experiences. I admitted I was scared and was seriously considering moving out. My friend, trying to reassure me, insisted he could help. He said he would talk to the ghost. Though I was skeptical and a little uncomfortable, I let him try. While he sat cross-legged on the floor in front of the open closet, I stepped outside to watch through the bedroom window. For about 15 minutes, I saw him talking softly, gesturing as though having a one-sided conversation. When he was done, he closed the closet door and signaled to me to come back inside. He wouldn't tell me what he said, but he promised that my troubles were over. And he was right. For the next 5 years, I lived in blissful peace. In the summer of 2007, though, everything changed. I was working on my computer in the bedroom, enjoying some music and a warm breeze through the window, when I heard a loud crash from the kitchen. I ran to investigate and found a beautiful old ceramic serving platter smashed on the floor. The platter had been sitting on the counter, yet somehow it had ended up 5 feet away in the middle of the room. That marked the end of the peace and quiet. For the next 10 months, the activity returned with a vengeance. It escalated to the point where even my friend, who had spoken to the ghost years earlier, couldn't help. My boyfriend refused to stay in the apartment alone for more than a few minutes, and other friends often commented on how uncomfortable they felt, even when we were all together. By spring of 2008, I had had enough. I moved to another small town in Massachusetts. Since then, I haven't experienced anything to suggest my current home is haunted. The peace I had hoped for back in 2002 has finally returned, though it took a new home to find it. In 1986, I was recently divorced with 2 young children, both under the age of 4. For a year, we stayed with my sister until I could afford a place of our own. Then, in late 1987, I found what seemed like our dream home, a cozy 3-bedroom trailer in Ypsilanti, Michigan. It was green, 14 by 70 feet, and just the right size for the 3 of us. Excited, I bought it, and by November of that year, we moved in. First, everything was normal. The trailer felt like home, and we were happy to have our own space. But by the spring of 1988, strange things began to happen. One weekend, my children were visiting their dad, leaving me home alone. I woke in the middle of the night to the sound of running water. Confused, I went to investigate and found the bathroom faucet on full blast. I turned it off and thought nothing more of it. Maybe it was just a plumbing issue. Not long after, my oldest son, Jimmy, came into my room one night, asking if I'd forgotten to turn the bathroom faucet off again. I assured him I hadn't. When I mentioned the earlier incident, his eyes widened, and I regretted saying anything. A few weeks later, both boys came running into my room, frightened. Jimmy told me the water had turned on again, but this time, when he went to shut it off, the faucet stopped on its own while he watched. From then on, my boys refused to sleep in their rooms, opting to share mine for comfort. That summer, things grew stranger. One day, I went to check on Jimmy, but he stopped me at the door. "Don't come in, Mom," he said. "You'll step on my friend." Confused, I asked where his friend was. "Right here by the door," he replied. Though I couldn't see anyone, I respected his request. "Let me know when your friend leaves," I told him. Over the years, we got used to the odd happenings. One evening, Jimmy's battery-powered toy car, which had no batteries in it, started moving on its own, spinning in circles before stopping dead. Another time, while my mother and aunt were visiting, the electric can opener turned on by itself. It sounded exactly like it was opening a can, but no one was near it. My aunt, startled, asked if this happened often. I simply shrugged. "Stuff like this happens now and then," I said. We laughed it off and continued watching our movie. In 1993, after my mother passed away, the activity increased. Late one night, as I struggled with insomnia, I smelled lilacs, my mom's favorite Avon perfume. It was so vivid that it felt like she was there. I whispered, "I love you, Mom. I miss you. Thanks for visiting." After that, I finally got some rest. But the activity didn't stop. Lights would turn on and off seemingly at will, particularly in the hallway. At times, the hallway lights would go out just as my bedroom lights turned on. "Mom, you're scaring me. Cut it out," I'd shout, and the lights would stop. Later that year, I began hearing voices in the hallway. One day, I was home alone when I heard faint murmurs. Stepping into the hall, I expected to see someone, but no one was there. Suddenly, the bathroom faucet turned on again, full blast. Fed up, I stormed into the bathroom and yelled, "Stop it! I'm tired of this water nonsense." To my surprise, the water stopped, and it never happened again. By then, I had a partner, Camerlo, living with us. One day, he visited me at work, pale and shaken. "Why didn't you tell me your place is haunted?" he asked. He recounted how, after turning off the stereo and TV, both had turned back on without explanation, even though the knobs were still set to off. Though startled, I laughed. "Yep, that happens," I told him. As we packed up to move in 1996, the activity didn't let up. One morning, Jimmy saw a floating figure of an elderly woman in the living room. She glided toward the hallway and disappeared, passing right through me. "I don't know how I know this, Mom," Jimmy said, "but it was Grandma. She looked sad that we're leaving." Even our cats sensed things. Sometimes, they'd hiss and swipe at something invisible in the hallway, their fur standing on end. At night, They'd cower behind furniture, clearly disturbed by something we couldn't see. On our last night in the trailer, I stood in front of my full-length mirror, reflecting on our time there. As I stared, I felt a presence behind me. Looking back, there was nothing there. But when I turned back to the mirror, I saw my mother's face over my shoulder. She looked sad but calm. I smiled at her reflection, but when I turned around, she was gone. When I looked back in the mirror, her image had vanished. We left the next day, June 29, 1996. Years later, I drive by the trailer park, wondering if the presence still lingered. Jimmy visited the site recently and found that the trailer had been removed. Yet, the memories of our time there, of the strange occurrences and the unseen presence that never harmed us, remain vivid and unforgettable. This story reflects a profound connection between the living and the departed, one that transcends logic and touches on the depth of human empathy and spiritual awareness. It began with a simple walk through a graveyard, a place I often visited for reflection and peace. Among the resting places of tiny souls in the children's section, my foot unexpectedly sank into a grave. That moment changed everything. As I tried to pull my foot free, it felt as though something was holding on, though nothing visible grasped me. Fear surged through me, but so did an overwhelming sense of sorrow and connection. The gravestone belonged to an infant, a child who lived only days. I whispered a prayer, and the grasp released. I fled the cemetery, vowing never to return, but that resolve didn't last. Each night, dreams of the baby called me back. I couldn't shake the feeling that this child's spirit was reaching out to me. The graveyard became a regular destination, and I would stand at the grave, offering prayers and wondering what the baby needed. The dreams persisted, a silent plea I couldn't ignore. Eventually, I sought help. The funeral director, compassionate and understanding, shared the child's story after obtaining the mother's permission. The baby, unwanted by its mother and never held, had passed from sudden infant death syndrome, SIDS. Tears streamed down my face as I listened. The depth of this little soul's loneliness moved me beyond words. At the grave, I felt compelled to offer comfort. In my heart and mind, I imagined lifting the child from the ground, cradling it in my arms, and singing softly, "You are loved. You are not forgotten." I placed flowers on the grave and, for the first time, felt a profound calm wash over me. The baby's spirit, I believed, found the love and peace it had sought. I continued to visit regularly, bringing flowers, praying, and singing. Each visit was a moment of connection, an act of love for a soul that had known so little of it in life. When I relocated years later, I made one last visit to say goodbye, tears of love and sorrow flowing freely. I promised to return whenever possible, and though my visits became less frequent, I kept that promise as best I could. This experience taught me that love can reach beyond the veil of death. That baby's spirit needed to be seen, held, and cherished, even if only by a stranger. Through these acts, I felt I had given the child peace, and in return, I found a deeper understanding of the unseen bonds that connect us all. Though I can no longer visit often, I carry this baby's memory in my heart. One day, I hope to return and offer that love again, a testament to the enduring power of compassion and connection. Sorry to interrupt. If you're enjoying the story, let me know in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more. This happened in Lower Michigan in the 1990s. I often passed by a charming, old church on my way to the store or home. It was the kind of church you'd see on a Christmas card, white with a tall steeple, exuding a timeless charm. One day, I decided to call and find out about their services. A kind lady named Dottie answered and told me about the church. She mentioned it was over 100 years old, with various additions made over the years. Dottie invited me to come anytime and suggested their monthly potluck on the third Saturday as a good opportunity to meet people. She even offered to meet me out front so I wouldn't feel alone. I thanked her, but it took me a couple of months before I called back. When I finally did, she agreed to meet me at the church and was there, waiting out front when I arrived. The church had an old-fashioned feel. The pews were like the flip-up seats you'd find in an old theater. It wasn't fancy, but it felt welcoming. After the service, we went to the basement for fellowship. Someone's birthday was being celebrated, so there were cake and drinks. Dottie introduced me to many people, all of whom made me feel welcomed. I began attending the church regularly. One Sunday, Dottie asked if I'd help her stock the side room off the fellowship hall with food and supplies for the community. I agreed, but as soon as I entered the side room, I noticed it was extremely cold. I mentioned it to Dottie, and she just shrugged, opening the door wider to let in some warmth from the fellowship room. After a while, she asked, "Are you warmed up yet?" I replied that I wasn't and that I felt uneasy in the room. She smiled and said, "You'll get used to it." Confused, I asked what she meant, but she didn't answer. As we continued unpacking, I suddenly felt like the air was being sucked out of me. I struggled to catch my breath. Alarmed, Dottie asked what was wrong, and I told her I needed to leave the room. As I stepped out into the fellowship room, I felt a presence glide past me. Once out of the side room, I could breathe normally again. Dottie came over and asked if I was feeling okay. I explained what had happened and how uneasy I felt in that room. She admitted that it was always cold in there, even on hot days, but she'd never felt like the air was being taken from her.
After getting to know the people at the church, I started asking them about the side room. No one seemed to know or care about it. Some even gave me strange looks, as if I was talking about something taboo. Over time, people began to distance themselves from me, making me feel unwelcome. Eventually, I stopped attending the church and haven't been back in over 5 years. Dottie, however, remained kind and supportive. She never brought up the side room again, but I always felt she understood what I had experienced. Sadly, she has since passed on, but I often think about her. I believe she may have gone through the same experience in that room, but chose to keep it to herself. This story was told to me by my nephew Jeff about an experience he had in 1988 with his newborn daughter, Leanne. At the time, Jeff, his wife, and their baby lived in a trailer. The trailer was small, with the baby's room at one end, Jeff and his wife's room at the other, and the kitchen and living room in the middle. One night, Jeff woke up feeling thirsty. He went to the kitchen, ran the tap, and drank some water. As he stood there, he heard a strange noise coming from Leanne's room. Curious and slightly concerned, he went to check on her. When he entered the room, he saw her cradle gently rocking, as if an invisible hand was moving it. Leanne was sound asleep. Jeff searched the room. He checked the closet, nothing. The window was still sealed and locked. Yet the cradle continued rocking. Turning on the light, he felt a chill despite the warm summer night, and the hair on the back of his neck stood up. Unable to find an explanation, he eventually left the room and returned to bed. For a few nights, nothing happened. Jeff began to think it was just his imagination. But then it happened again. One night, he woke up with a strong urge to check on Leanne. When he flipped on the light in her room, the hair on his neck and arms rose once more. The cradle was rocking, and Leanne was asleep, completely undisturbed. Again, Jeff searched the room and found nothing. No open windows, no signs of anything unusual. Then, one night, Jeff woke up to use the bathroom. On his way back, he decided to check on Leanne again. This time, he froze in shock. Standing over the cradle was a man wearing bib overalls, leaning toward his daughter as if to pick her up. Jeff panicked and rushed toward the figure, but before he could reach him, the man vanished into thin air. Shaken, Jeff picked up Leanne and took her into his bedroom to tell his wife what he had just witnessed. For a while, they kept Leanne in their room, but eventually, Jeff decided to put her back in the cradle and monitor her closely from the living room. One night, as he checked on her again, he saw the man standing by the cradle. This time, Jeff didn't panic. He realized the figure wasn't there to harm Leanne, but was trying to communicate something. As Jeff approached, he noticed an odd smell in the room, like gas. He immediately took Leanne out of the room. The next day, Jeff smelled gas again, this time in the kitchen. Worried, he called a technician. When they inspected the trailer, they discovered a gas leak directly beneath Leanne's room. The leak was repaired, and the danger was averted. Determined to learn more, Jeff dug into the history of the land and the trailer park. He discovered that a farmhouse had once stood where the park was now located. Decades earlier, a fire had broken out in the house. A father had died trying to save his baby daughter, but tragically, both perished in the flames. Jeff realized the man in overalls was the spirit of that father. He wasn't there to harm anyone but to warn Jeff about the gas leak, helping him save his own daughter in a way the spirit couldn't save his. Grateful, Jeff returned to the room and thanked the man for his help. He later reflected that not all ghosts are harmful. Some are there to guide and protect us if we're willing to pay attention to the signs. This happened in Michigan, in a large house with a huge basement. The basement had 3 rooms, but one was divided into 2, a laundry room and a storage area. The storage room was filled with cases of glass bottles and other random items. The rest of the basement was a big, open space with exercise equipment, and beyond that, a smaller room with a single window. I was babysitting a young girl named Jill, who was around 10, while I was nearly 18. One evening, Jill told me about a neat game she and her friends played with a board that could supposedly spell out answers to questions. Intrigued, I asked if it actually worked. She said it did, as long as no one cheated. I was curious and told her I might like to try it sometime.
Jill invited her friend Carol to come over, and soon the 3 of us went down to the basement with a Ouija board. We lit a candle and sat in a circle. Jill explained how to place our fingers on the planchette. As soon as we started, the candle went out, and we felt a breeze, though we couldn't figure out where it was coming from. It took several tries to get the candle to stay lit, but we finally began. First, nothing happened. We accused each other of cheating and eventually gave up. A few days later, we tried again with Carol and played several times, but it always ended with arguments over someone moving the planchette. On the 3rd occasion, Jill suggested we invite Tammy, another friend, to join us. Tammy had recently lost her 3-year-old brother in a car accident, and Jill thought we could ask the board about him. In hindsight, we shouldn't have done that. That evening, there were 6 of us in total. We sat in a circle with the candle lit, but just like before, we couldn't keep it from going out. A cold wind swept through the room, even though there were no open windows. When Tammy asked, "Is my brother on the other side?" we suddenly heard banging noises coming from the dark room nearby. Instead of being scared, we were intrigued. Tammy asked again, "Can you give me a sign my brother is okay?" The banging noises grew louder, and the candle went out, plunging us into total darkness. I saw lights bouncing off the walls, and no matter how hard we tried, we couldn't relight the candle. Then, Jill asked the board, "Who or what is making these lights?" Almost immediately, we heard glass bottles shattering in the storage room. The noise was deafening, and panic set in. The bottles began smashing against the walls of the room we were in. Tammy claimed she could hear her brother's voice, though none of us could. I felt something brush past my face, like a spiderweb or a net trying to wrap around me. Another girl screamed that she'd been hit by a bottle. The moaning sounds coming from the dark room grew louder, and we were too scared to move. We clung to each other, terrified. I told everyone to hold hands and not let go until we found the stairway. The walls felt strange, sometimes burning hot, other times icy cold, but eventually we made it upstairs. Once we were in the safety of the house, things seemed normal. The lights were on, the radio was still playing, and nothing appeared out of place. However, Tammy had a cut on her arm, likely from flying glass, and Carol's clothes were shredded as if someone had taken scissors to them, though she didn't feel anything. When Jill's mom came home, we told her what had happened. She didn't believe us and insisted we clean up the mess. Reluctantly, we went back to the basement, and sure enough, there were shattered bottles and sticky residue all over the walls. Jill's mom was the only one who went unscathed by whatever was in that basement. After that, Jill's mom burned the Ouija board, hoping to get rid of whatever had come out of it. Even so, I always felt like something was watching me in that basement. Jill's mom admitted she felt it too, which is why she never went down there alone. Years later, Jill's family moved out of that house, and I often wonder if the new residents have experienced anything unusual. If you ever consider using a Ouija board, all I can say is this: Danger is just waiting to happen. In 1991, my parents decided to move our family across the country to a small town in northern Michigan. My dad claimed he had found the perfect house for us, an early 1900s Victorian home. It had a little remodeling done by the previous owners, including an addition with a new kitchen, a greenhouse, and a 5-stall garage. With our U-Haul and station wagon packed, we left California for Michigan. The drive was long, and being 7 years old with 3 siblings crammed into the car, we drove my mom crazy. As we turned onto our new street, I noticed all the houses were old, with enormous oak trees lining the road. Ours was the biggest on the street, and it looked the most haunted. It was a pale yellow house with white shutters, a huge wraparound porch and bay windows. It was massive, perfect for our family of 6, though the price was steep. My older brother was the first to bolt from the car, running up the front steps and yelling for the key to open the door. Grabbing the keys from my dad, I raced to unlock it. As the door swung open, we stepped into the foyer, a 2-story room with a massive wooden staircase leading to the 2nd floor. The 4 of us kids darted up the stairs to claim the best bedrooms. Once we'd chosen, the moving crew began hauling our belongings inside. By the end of the first week, the house was starting to feel like ours. But that's when I started hearing noises. My parents brushed them off as the old house settling. Having only lived in a newer house in California before, I wasn't used to the creaks and thuds of an old home. Then, during our 3rd week there, I woke up to a loud thud in the hallway outside my room. I got up to investigate but found nothing. The next night, I was jolted awake when my blankets were ripped off my bed. I screamed for my parents, who rushed in and dismissed it as a bad dream. My brothers, ages 5, 9, and 13, said they hadn't heard a thing. A month passed without any other strange occurrences, until breakfast one morning, when my 13-year-old brother claimed he saw a woman in a red blazer and glasses sitting in his room during the night. He said she vanished when he turned on the lamp. My parents told him to stop watching so much TV. A week later, I experienced the same thing. The woman in the red blazer was sitting on the edge of my bed, humming a lullaby. Even with 2 of us reporting these encounters, my parents didn't believe us. They thought we were making things up because we missed our friends. That changed the day my mom walked out of the laundry room and bumped into a man in the hallway. Over the years, these ghostly encounters became normal. When I was 12, we threw a birthday party for my brother, but none of his friends would come over. They were too scared of our haunted house. Things were escalating. I once saw a man walk through a door, and it shook me to my core. My older brother, now 18 and living away at college, came home with his girlfriend during a break. She went to use the bathroom, and moments later we heard her scream. She came out, visibly shaken, and said someone had slapped her across the face. She described a woman in a red blazer, someone none of us knew. Curious about the history of the house, we did some research. We discovered that the family who originally built the home had 4 sons. Tragically, all 4 boys were killed in an accident. The father later died in another tragic incident, and the mother, after losing her entire family, ended her own life. We came to believe that the woman in the red blazer was the mother. She seemed to spend time in the kids' rooms, humming lullabies and watching over us, as though we reminded her of her lost sons. Over time, the spirits in our house became part of our daily lives. They never harmed us, and we even started addressing them by name when we saw them. Though they never responded, they became part of our home's history. In fact, our haunted house makes for some of the best Halloween parties in town. This happened in Michigan in the late 1990s when I worked the afternoon shift, from 3 p.m. until midnight, at a gas station convenience store called Stop and Shop. Sometimes, when other employees didn't show up, I would work until 5 a.m. The store was located on a main road in the countryside, with houses spread far apart. The only nearby structures were a store that closed at 5 p.m. and a couple of houses, one kitty corner to the store and another farther down the road. The only light outside came from the gas pumps. For the first 9 months of my job, everything was normal. Then one night, just before midnight, I heard noises coming from the back room where we stored cans of beer and soda. It sounded like cans being tossed into a container. Between customers, I went to check, but no one was there. Thinking it might be mice, I went back to work. Around 1 a.m., I heard the noise again. I brushed it off as mice and finished my shift. When my manager came in at 5 a.m., I told her about the noise. She called an exterminator to check for mice or bugs. The next day, she told me there were no signs of pests or holes for anything to get in. I thought nothing of it and went back to work a few nights later. Just before midnight, I heard the noise again. This time, I went to the back room to get some items for the cooler. When I returned to the front, there were 5 men in the store. 4 were Caucasian, and one, standing by the counter with his back to me, appeared to be Hispanic. He kept his right hand in his coat pocket and didn't say a word. The others gathered snacks, beer, and chips. Then one of the men approached the counter and told me, "This is a robbery." I stayed calm, telling them, "Let me help you get the money." I took the cash drawer out and set it on the counter, using my leg to discreetly press the silent alarm. They took the money, thanked me, and left. The police came and I filed a report. After 2 days off, I returned to work, still unsettled by the robbery. Just before midnight, I heard the noise in the back room again. Still thinking it might be mice, I ignored it. But a week later, it happened again, just before midnight. This time, the same 5 men walked into the store. I knew what was coming but kept my composure. Once again, they robbed me, and once again, I triggered the silent alarm. The police came, and I filed another report, telling them the robberies always happened at midnight. After the second robbery, I switched to the daytime shift. But one night, a coworker named Crystal, not her real name, went into labor, and I was asked to cover her shift. I arrived at 8 p.m. By now, the pattern was clear to me. Just before midnight, I heard the cans in the back room again. Dread washed over me as I thought, am I going to be robbed again? Right on cue, the same 5 men walked in at midnight. As always, the Hispanic man stood silently in front of me with his hand in his pocket, while one of the others spoke. After taking the money, they thanked me and left. When the police arrived, I handed them the keys and called my manager, demanding she come in to run the store. When she refused and threatened to fire me if I left, I said, "Fine, I'm fired." I gave the keys to the officer and told him to lock up before leaving. I wasn't staying in that store another minute. I never found out why I kept hearing the noise before the robberies. It was like something was warning me each time. 2 months later, those same men robbed the store a total of 6 times. Finally, the police set up a stakeout and caught them. Oddly, they were always polite, even thanking me for helping them during the robberies. I later ran into Crystal after she had her baby. She told me she was robbed at noon twice, and each time, she had heard noises in the back room beforehand. Whether it was a coincidence or something more, I'll never know.